Great. I know, thank you. It's a hybrid meeting of the City Council. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8, the city's website and YouTube. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council study session by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091 #.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. City Clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Tonight for the study session, we have three presentations. First up is a building code update. I'll invite Brian Foley, Kelly Gray, and representatives from South Adams County Fire Protection District forward to give the presentation.
Good evening. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Foley. I'm the Chief Building Official here in the city. We're here to discuss the adoption, the next adoption of the building code, which is we're affectionately call it the C3BC, the Commerce City Building Code. Here's our quick agenda. We'll go on to our first slide. The C3BC is really the adoption of nationally recognized and adopted codes from the International Code Council. And there's a bunch of them right there on your screen for you to see. We're right now on the 2018 versions. But what we do is we take some of these codes and we will make amendments to them so that they're more local and they fit the needs of our community rather than take them right out of the box. So what each code cycle, every 3 years we update the code, and in each cycle the next edition of the code will bring in new functionality, more technology. Just brings everything up to date, and it also helps our ISO rating. What's an ISO rating? ISO rating is building departments across the nation are rated on our ability to be an effective and efficient building department. We produce that. ISO is a company that sells data of the building departments to insurance companies. And insurance companies can then use it to reduce or increase insurance rates for homeowners and business owners throughout the city. A higher rating is lower insurance rates, vice versa for a low rating. Higher insurance rates, we can potentially reduce claims by 50% if the building department is effective. I'd like to think that we are. ISO elements include how much staff we have, our staff's credentials and how much training they take every year, what's our disaster, our potential, and how can we adapt to and respond to disasters. And are we on the most recent codes? The most recent codes right now are the 21 codes. ISO rates on residential and commercial, the higher the number, the better. My last jurisdiction that I worked for, we were a #1 for commercial and a #2 for residential. And the reason we weren't #1 for residential is because we didn't require residential sprinklers. There's foreshadowing here. At the national level, every 3 years, we meet in a giant ballroom in a hotel. People from all over the country. We go through this circular process of adopting the code by having new amendments and having the public comment on them, adopting them, and publishing them so that we can then pick them up and do something locally. And we get input from code officials around the country, from the National Association of Home Builders, the EPA, Department of Energy, and lots of U.S. Department, federal government agencies opine on the code changes, and obviously the design community. Locally, we do something very, very similar. We get input from you all, staff, folks behind me, industry, and we're right now, as you can see in that circular, we're in the evaluate section, and we are obtaining city council direction. When we're complete here, we'll have a draft that will move forward and get some feedback from industry. Industry right now has given us what they say are problematic code changes that we'll discuss tonight, and then we'll get more feedback from them. But I've already initiated feedback, so we're kind of a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we're in good shape right now. So we're going from the 2018 to the 2021. These are all the codes that we could potentially adopt. So we're talking tonight strictly about residential changes, and any change that is controversial will increase the cost of a structure or of a house or townhouse. That cost will be then turned and will be turned into an increase in price that will be paid by the home buyer. The three categories I'm looking at are life safety, green construction, and energy conservation. The first up is drywall under floors. Has anyone ever seen the wood eye joists? Well, they burn quickly. And because of that, our fire officials nationally wish to protect them. So if you have an unfinished basement, the code requires, right out of the code book, out of the box, requires you to finish the floors even if you don't have a finished basement. And that is to protect the homeowners in the event of a fire to exit the building safely. We currently at this time amend this requirement out of the code. So this is not a Commerce City requirement. This would cost an additional for a representative house. This would cost a home buyer, about $2,500. So there's a decision point we come to. Do we require it or not? And this is the direction I'm looking from you as to whether you want to give us that direction to move forward. And if you have any questions, we've got lots of experts behind me that can help you get to that decision point. Any thoughts?
Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you. Could you explain that a little bit more, the drywall under the floors?
Sure, let me go back to the image. You see the image that's on your screen right now? That is an unfinished basement. That is right now currently legal in our city.
Right.
If we were to have this code change, that would be illegal. You would have to put a ceiling in there, a solid ceiling of drywall, which is, and forgive me, drywall is non-combustible. It is used to stop and prevent fires. So that's why drywall is very important. So the drywall, what it does is it slows down a fire if it were to start in the basement so that the occupants of the building have sufficient time to exit.
Okay. So the drywall would not be on the basement floor, it would be
On the
on the
underside of the
ceiling.
first floor.
So it would be,
That's correct.
okay, and that's
Yeah,
what,
drywall
that's
on
what
the
I
floors,
wasn't
right.
clear on.
Now, there are
Yeah.
exemptions to this. The exemptions are if you have a 2x10 or 2x12, you know, the old-fashioned lumber, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do it in a crawl space. So there are exceptions to this, but it's mostly for unfinished basements. For new construction only, you do not need to do this in existing construction, only new. But very good question.
Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Could you give some perspective on what other cities has the drywall under floors as a requirement that you're discussing here?
I going to speculate. I'm going to ask I should have introduced these. This is Randall Legum. He's from Fire Marshal's office, and Ryan Doherty, and then where's Kelly? And this is Kelly Gray behind me. He's with the city. So Randall?
what I can tell you is a lot of jurisdictions are going to residential fire sprinklers to remove this, putting the drywall up on the ceiling. Exactly how many jurisdictions are keeping this in, I don't know the exact number. But what this does for us as a fire department and homeowners is it gives us another, I would say, 30-minute protection before it gets into the structural elements and collapses the floor in the house. So what this does is this $2,500 would provide that homeowner the extra protection before that floor collapses. Westminster, which you'll probably hear a little bit earlier, Westminster, Fort Collins, Larimer County, Boulder County, have all adopted residential fire sprinklers that is a part of not having to drywall these unfinished basements in theirs. So the other jurisdictions, I don't know if they're requiring the drywall and unfinished basements or not.
So would you prefer sprinklers or the drywall?
I would prefer sprinklers, and the reason for that is because that gives the homeowner the life safety issues throughout the house. So if a fire were to start in a kitchen or in a bedroom, that would provide that life safety protection to be able to contain that fire, to let them escape, and for us to go in and then extinguish a smaller fire, which we do have a video later if you would like to see during the presentation that kind of shows the differences of those residential sprinklers compared to non-residential sprinklers. But I would go with the residential sprinkler systems.
And having experienced losing my home in a wildfire, I don't remember there being a big problem with the basement, but stuff definitely comes in from up above that helps spread the fire. So having sprinklers, it would seem, would be more helpful.
It would be more helpful, yes.
Thank you.
Sprinklers is the next item on the list. Foreshadowing there too. Any other questions, thoughts, direction?
Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you for this question, because I think this is interesting. The $2,500 for this doesn't seem like it's a lot. Obviously, we've been talking a lot of front-end costs lately on houses, and that's the only reason that's of significance. What does this change to the rest of the basement, though? I mean, I'm looking at doing my basement, and that's a significant amount of rerouting of everything else inside my basement to make it a livable space, if you will. So just in this picture, you're likely moving all of that ductwork somewhere else if you're doing the ceiling
no,
as well.
that could stay within. You could build bulkheads around the ductwork. None of that. Okay. All you would need to do is to cut the opening for the receptacles, light switches, things like that, light out receptacles.
It seems like that's a big difference to go to sprinklers just to avoid something like this. So is there some other reason to go to sprinklers?
Well, that's the next, if we go to the next item on the list, we may be able to come back to this one.
Okay.
If you decide to go for sprinklers, this one's moot, because it's exempt. You don't need to do this if you have residential sprinklers.
Got it.
And this is the residential sprinklers. We got some costs on that too. So let's go to residential sprinklers.
Before we do, Mayor Pro Tem.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thanks for bringing that up. But I agree also, and like you said, maybe the sprinklers will come up later, but for $2,500, that does seem like a small amount to save someone's life. So I do like that idea as well.
There are 8 items on our list, and if we were to vote yes on all of them, that would add a significant amount. So maybe we come back to some of these if we find out that cost is starting to accumulate. But let's go on to residential sprinklers, and we'll come back to this one. Residential sprinklers uses the domestic line. You don't have to have a separate water line coming into your house. It is part of your water system. It is the least expensive residential sprinkler system that you can put in a home. It can reduce your insurance rates up to 35%, and we get better ISO rating. It helps protect property, our first responders, and most importantly, our occupants. very, very non-complex. Its cost is unfortunately not cheap. It's approximately $4,200 per your standard average house that is part of this analysis. Just to give you some context, here is the nation. There's only 2 states that require it statewide. Lots of smaller jurisdictions around the nation do require it. There is the states in yellow are the states that require it for townhomes and duplexes. The states in orange require it as an option, that the developers and builders must provide it as an option. This is the point where I'll ask your permission if you would like to see the video of it's a 5-minute video. We can speed it up to 2 times the speed so that we get through this quicker. Or I can just give you a brief synopsis of it. It's your choice. What's your call?
Play the video.
Play the video. Dylan, could you click on the image? It's a built-in link. Okay. I'll come over here to speed it up if you want to. And also it's a 3D link, a 3D video. Yeah, go ahead and hit play. Let's go 1.75 at this point, just so that you can understand what we're saying.
Are the same size, same windows and doors. The fires in both rooms were ignited within combustible materials commonly found in typical living rooms. One room is protected with a home fire sprinkler. The other is not. This is the room that does not have a fire in 2 minutes. The fire burns hot and fast. It creates toxic smoke that spreads throughout the house. You are about to experience 2 fires in 2 rooms that were set up with identical furnishings. The rooms are the same size, same windows and doors. The fires in both rooms were ignited within combustible materials commonly found in typical living rooms. One room is protected with a home fire sprinkler. The other is not. This is the room that does not have a fire sprinkler. After the fire starts, it quickly moves up the curtain and spreads to the furniture. The smoke alarm activates at 24 seconds. Look above you and behind you. The smoke is thick and dark. There is nothing to stop the fire, so it builds strength, generating heat and producing poisonous smoke until flashover, the point at which everything in the room ignites. Watch for that when the timer reads 2 minutes. No one can survive flashover.
If you're still in this room, you're suffering burns right now.
Look around. Everything is destroyed by the extreme heat and smoke. Remember the flashover? There would be only seconds for the family to escape a fire before flashover. The destruction in this room makes it clear the home is uninhabitable and a complete loss. This room is protected with one fire sprinkler in the ceiling. As the curtain catches fire, note how fast the flames spread. Watch the timer. At 26 seconds, smoke activates the smoke alarm. Find the sprinkler in the ceiling.
It's right there.
At 37 seconds, high heat from the fire activates the sprinkler, controlling the fire and preventing it from becoming deadly. Only the heat from fire activates the sprinkler, not smoke. In a typical house fire, only one sprinkler will activate. Take a close look at the room after the sprinkler activated. There is very little damage. The room is wet, but intact. Look around the room. If a family were sleeping, the sprinkler would have given them time to safely escape. The fire is confined to the room of origin, and the family would likely be able to stay in the home or move back into the home in a few days.
Okay. So let's go back to cost. Of the four options that we offer you is require sprinklers for every new residential structure. Be about $4,200 for a detached home, approximately $2,500 for a townhouse. And the only reason it's a little reduced for a townhouse is because if you put a sprinkler in a townhouse, you can reduce your firewall to be less protective. So you do get some cost benefit of that. So the net difference is $2,500. The next is to require it in townhomes only, and that's just under 30% of our new homes in the city. The third is to require it as an option, and it would be up to the home buyer to make that decision. And the last is to not require it at all. At this time, we do not require it in the code. We amended it out. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I do, like I said, I really like the idea of having the sprinklers and making it, for homes and townhomes, et cetera. But I was just curious too, like once they are installed, is there any statistics, just because I had a recent flood in my home from a Culligan softener, but do you guys have any statistics as to like if there's leakage or flooding or malfunctions from the sprinkler systems?
I personally don't have that statistics. Do my colleagues from the fire department have those statistics?
No, we do not. These heads produce about 14 gallons a minute. And like the video said, there's usually 1 to 2 sprinkler heads that go off at a time. And it would take us approximately from the time we're dispatched around 6 minutes to get there. So it depends on how often or how quick the 911 caller gets it to us. So if you're looking at 2 heads going off 28 gallons per minute for 6 minutes is what you're gonna look at. But when we show up as a fire department in a house, we're flowing around 250 gallons per minute out of our fire hose. And as the video showed, you have a lot more damage that you're gonna have to worry about in the long run with the 250 gallon plus a minute of water supply that we put on there. The water damage that we got on restoration companies, where they usually can just suck that out of the carpets and then put fans up and dry them. And then that's what we've run into in our apartment buildings that have the residential fire sprinkler systems in the units themselves, that they're able to stay inside their unit. And then the company comes in and just dries out the unit, and that's it. And then they may have to replace a little bit of furnishings. But to give you exact numbers, I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay, thanks. And then would residents or the homeowner be required to like get it inspected every so often?
So the one thing about the residential fire sprinkler system we're going with, it's out of the plumbing code. So it's tied into the domestic water system. So once you install it, there isn't any other inspections or any other upkeep that you have to do. It's tied into your regular cold water system inside your house. So that actually flushes the system and maintains it. So once it's installed, there isn't any other inspections or anything associated with it.
Okay, yeah, because I do, once again, think that's a small amount to save someone's life, so I like to see required for everything. Thank you.
Sure.
And just to let you know, we in 2021, we did have a fatality in a residential home. It was a disabled person that wasn't able to evacuate, and a residential sprinkler system like this would have been able to save that person.
Okay, thank you.
I will tell you that when we go to adopt to this code, and it's in front of you, we open it up to the public, the home builders will be adamantly against this and will testify against this code change. So I've just given you fair warning that when that time comes, there will be opposition if you choose to move forward with this.
Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you, Mayor Huesman. I kind of want to piggyback on Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas's question. I think what she was getting at, do these ever go off without a fire, and would there be potential for a home to be flooded and no one would know about it until it was, the home was flooded?
Correct. So this would be just like your domestic water, your hot and cold water inside your house. So the potential with this type of system, this P2904 system, this piping can expand and contract to the air temperature in your house. So it's less likely to have a break in it. But there is that potential to where, yes, just like your hot or cold water lines you have in your house now, that it could have a break in it to where you could flood your home until you have somebody actually shut off your domestic water system. I would say it's at the same, I guess, percentage of possibility as a hot or cold water in your house breaking at this point.
So would that be, like if your pipes froze, would that be potential for?
Correct.
Okay.
So they are designed to where they're mounted on walls now instead of in the ceilings, but then if they're in the ceilings, they have ways where we call tint them. So we take a material over top of the piping and then put the insulation over that, so it gets the heat from the residents inside the room, gets the heat through the ceiling up into that piping so it won't freeze.
Yeah, watching the video, that's pretty scary to see how fast a fire can start and spread. Yeah, that would be my biggest concern, would be if someone like left for the holidays and didn't have their heat turned up high enough, which a lot of people turn down their heat and then they come home to a house that's been flooded. So I'm just wondering, though, with this sprinklers, would that make it more likely to have a pipe that bursts?
No, I think I refer back to the reduction that fire insurance companies, residential house insurance companies are giving to people that have residential sprinklers. That 35% reduction is what we're kind of seeing on an average. So insurance companies are looking at that saying a water leak is a lot less than if you have a fire in your home.
Right.
So,
Yes.
But as you say, there's always that chance that
Okay.
if you leave for vacation and there isn't enough heat in the house to heat the piping, it's going to do no different than your faucet piping inside a wall.
All right, thank you. Well, I don't think you're gonna lose your life if your pipe bursts and your house floods, whereas you could lose your life easily in a fire. And so to me, the cost would be worth it. Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation.
Any other questions? Any direction you'd like to give us?
Councilmember Noble?
How do we know that a builder will charge $4,200 and not $10,000?
We don't.
Okay. And then you said it could be optional. Do we know any other cities in the area that have put in sprinklers?
I have a list here. There are specifics. For instance, Denver requires them only on townhouses and detached single-family dwellings when they go above 3 stories, when they have something called a habitable attic. Aurora, same exact criteria for Aurora. Lakewood, not required at all. Arvada, not required. Fort Collins, they do require them, and Boulder requires them as well for all. And then Boulder has required them for a while. Oh, and Westminster, yes, that wasn't on my list here, but Westminster does.
Okay, so another option would be that they put in the drywall under the
So
boards,
yeah,
and we could, I'm trying to combine the two.
it's exactly what
They
I.
put
where
the
I- here we go.
drywall and then do either optional, that the builder has to make it optional, or also include townhouses and duplexes, because, you know, you are endangering the house next to you very quickly in a far different way than single family.
If I were to strike a balance or a compromise, I would say option B is the one that I would suggest, simply because that is the wave of where we're going. I know some other states are becoming online to require that. You'll see in the previous slide more yellow states than red as the code advances. I think this is a slow start to residential sprinklers nationwide, but we're very, very lucky here that we're all in a domestic water rather than well water. So any new construction would be easy to install. But if that helps you make a decision.
And I did like the option of the yellow and white stripe. I didn't see where it was in the US, but it was an option.
If you're looking at Massachusetts requires them in townhomes, and they require them to be optional in all other structures.
Okay, I didn't see the stripe, but it must be there.
That's Massachusetts.
Okay.
Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I think my preference was kind of in line with Councilmember Noble's, to kind of do an E where we require them on townhomes and duplexes, and then required as an option for any single housing dwellings. But in combination with that, have the basement drywall
If
as
they
a
choose
requirement.
not to sprinkler, then require okay.
Correct.
All right. I like how we've combined them. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that either. I think there's a combination. This is a tough one. I think part of the pushback, and I'm going to ask you to kind of steel man the other side of the argument, but kind of the pushback is, if everybody's doing it, the supply chain makes all of this much easier from a cost standpoint, from, you know, having the techs to repair these types of things. There creates a whole industry, if you will. I think that's part of the pushback. You know, it's all do it or let's nobody do it is what it feels like. But what are those other challenges? This is the first time I've seen you guys present or any presentation on kind of that built into the water line system. What's the pushback on that? Because that to me seems similar to a water hose with a different trigger point.
Yeah, what you'll hear the home builders say is that this means you'll have less, if you raise the price of the house that much, that's that many people, and they probably have percentages and numbers, that will no longer qualify for that house. And if it is the national target is to have as many people own homes as possible, that reduces that opportunity.
Yeah, I understand that. I think singular, that's a tough argument to make, but when you combine it with everything else, that's maybe a little more valid. So, thank you.
Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you. It looks like we're gonna have a lot of the cluster homes with shared driveways coming down the pike. And I'm very concerned about those. Those are classified as single-family homes. However, especially in light of knowing what happened, the Marshall Fire, with those, and those weren't as close as the cluster homes are here.
Do know that sprinklers resist fires that start inside the house, not those that start outside.
Okay.
So Marshall Fire would not have really, the sprinklers would not have helped as much in the Marshall Fire as you might expect.
All right, thank you.
So I'm going to move on. I think I'm getting the feel.
I'd like to speak first.
Oh, sure, of course.
Curious, we had this great conversation about pipes freezing and sprinklers going. I've spent a lot of nights in a hotel room, and I'm always remarking at the stupidity of people requiring the fact that they have to put signs up on next to the sprinklers telling, don't hang your garments from there. You know, to me, the bigger concern is not in the pipe breaking, especially with the materials used, but in that sprinkler head itself failing and there not being there. I've also spent a lot of time walking into mechanical rooms and looking at the little box with the spare heads in there, ensuring that certain heads are not actually in the building because of recalls that have taken place and things of that nature. So when you make a requirement like this across a municipality, how are you ensuring that the most up-to-date information is reaching the homeowners that have these sprinkler heads to ensure they're aware of whether or not there was a recall or whether or not there's defective sprinkler heads out there that need to be replaced, and then the cost associated with the work to have that done?
There's nothing that I can do in implementing the building code to ensure any of that. It would be up to the developer, builder, to provide that information. It would be no different than any recall that you would have on your toaster oven, your freezer. At that point, once the builder leaves and your year's warranty is up, it's really all on the homeowner.
Yeah, the difference is I don't require you to go out and buy a toaster oven.
What we could do on the education side of it would be able to collect that data of what houses have those residential sprinkler systems in them. And then we would be able to, if a recall comes out, we could be proactive on that side of reaching out to these addresses and saying, hey, we got a recall. We need to follow up with you to make sure that it doesn't pertain to what sprinkler heads you have in your house at that time. Your question about going into hotels, and yes, the little don't hang your clothes off of these. The issue is these heads are what's called a flangeable bulb. So they're glass that has a material and a liquid in it that will boil at a certain, usually 135 degrees, and it'll ignite. So if you do a solid object into that glass, it has that possibility of breaking and letting that out. And that would all be an education perspective that we would look at on the fire department side on these residential sprinklers, is being able to hit these, especially homeowners associations, and have that information go out on a regular basis to these homeowners and these HOA letters or meetings that we already attend, and to get that information out to the residents, because we know that, you know, people are buying and selling all the time. But I think the data collection, when we start this, we could do in our program is to do that where these residential sprinklers are installed and have that as a public education piece to monitor them down the road. It's not an inspection, it's just, hey, this is the information about your system, and this is what it does for you, and this is how the fire department and the building department can help you maintain your systems to where it doesn't have that possibility of leaking or breaking the head or anything like that.
Okay, thanks. I understand the comment made about the Marshall Fire, and this wouldn't have had a huge impact. However, what is the percentage that we see of a fire starting within a structure and spreading to the adjacent structures?
We're looking at about an 8 to 10%, to where it's going from a single-family detached to another single-family detached. That's what we're looking at in our data that we're collecting.
It's a pretty considerable number. Does that number change based on the distance between the two structures?
And the fire resistive rating of the outside and the windows of those structures, but yes, it does. You also have your weather. You got to look into the wind currents is the big one that we look at when it starts hitting what we call exposures or that house next to it, depending on where the wind's going, how fast that wind is moving to spread that heat over to the next adjacent structure.
And what kind of outside building materials are more susceptible towards that spread taking place versus materials that are less susceptible?
Your non-rated, your Class A, I believe, which I believe you're going to talk about a little bit later. That's your most fire-resistive rated type construction.
Which is?
Which is metal, non-combustible.
Cementitious.
Yeah, cement type
Cement,
board
fiberboard
type
siding.
stuff.
Right.
Those type
Stucco.
of things, stucco.
And what's the other ratings that we have that are less susceptible or more susceptible?
That's gonna be your wood siding.
Vinyl.
Vinyl, it's gonna be your composite, your asphalt shingles, and your basically your vinyl, your plastics, that kind of stuff.
Very good. So safe to say that if I live in a house that has vinyl siding that is approximately 5 foot from my neighbor's house and my house catches on fire, you guys are 6 minutes away, it's a fully engulfed fire. The chances of the fire spreading from my house to the adjacent house are significantly higher without having these sprinklers in place, given that scenario?
Correct.
Okay. You know, this is the second time in 5 years that this subject has come up for the city council. The first time I was opposed to it. But given the change in how we're seeing building taking place throughout our community, I think that the best thing that we can do moving forward is to set the standard that is going to preserve life in the best manner possible. And so I would be in favor of requiring the sprinklers in all the single-family homes. I'm less supportive of the drywall in the basement. You know, I have drywall in my garage where it butts up against, you know, that's a code requirement if it butts up to a living surface. Where it doesn't butt to a living quarters or whatever, it's not required. But when I look at a basement, there's so much that can be done down in that basement as far as customization. And, you know, if you need to, whenever you go to finish that basement, you're basically going to rip all that drywall down, be able to replumb your ductwork, replumb your electrical, things of that nature. And so it's, to me, it's just not as advantageous, especially if you can provide an even better level of protection with the sprinklers. So I'm all in favor of us moving forward with that.
You know, and there's an exception that you don't need to put the drywall on the underside if you have a residential sprinkler. So you're speaking our language.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other comments on this subject?
Mayor, can I say one thing, to be totally out there? When you do finish your basement, you would have to readjust your sprinkler system in the basement to meet whatever stuff you got down there. So there would be an added cost on that side of it.
Sure. But much easier to do when you don't already have drywall in place that you got to rip down. And that's more drywall that just ends up in the landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Douglas?
Just wanted to say that I'm in favor of requiring this and forget about the drywall in the basement.
All right, I will move on then. The next is still fire related, and it is called Class 1 Ignition Resistant Construction. There is this book. This is one of the code books that the International Code Council publishes. We do not adopt this here. It's called the Wildland Urban Interface Code, and they require, based on where you're located, they require different levels of construction to be ignition resistant, much like we were just talking with the vinyl, exterior vinyl siding would not be permitted for Class 1. This is, the image there is obviously Marshall Fire. It's very expensive. You must have the sprinklers. It's about $13,300 per typical house to have this ignition resistance construction. So there were three options that you would require it. Option B is no longer on the table since we've decided to move forward with residential sprinklers. And option C is do not require it at all.
I got to pause you there. We didn't decide to move forward with residential speakers.
My apologies then.
Some of us have put our opinions out there, but clear direction has not been given from the city council, and we have not taken a vote.
Okay. Should we go back and vote?
We do not vote during study sessions.
Not during study session?
No.
Okay, so, all right.
Councilmember
Sorry, this is my first study session, so
No worries.
forgive me if I'm breaking rules.
No worries. Councilmember Noble.
The opinion that you expressed about the combustibility of vinyl versus other siding brings to mind something that I've been thinking about a lot over the past several months. And on Wednesday, I was at a meeting about affordable housing, and a woman sitting next to me was the Economic Development Director for Firestone. And she leaned over and said to me that Firestone prohibits vinyl siding. Isn't that a way to, so option D would be prohibit vinyl siding.
Option D would not restrict anything. It would be,
I'm giving you an option D.
oh, D, okay, would be to limit vinyl siding.
Yep. Ban vinyl siding. Except in the case where there's already vinyl siding on something, then they can, and it, you know, they have a problem with it, they need to repair it, then they can do it. But this is done in other cities, and it does seem to be very reasonable when we're looking at all of this.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'm at your disposal. If you as a entity would like to restrict vinyl siding, I don't see vinyl siding very often here since I've moved here. I saw it a lot back east, but not much here.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is wood siding out there, which is just as flammable as vinyl.
Are full houses being built with wood siding
Yes,
in Commerce City?
I believe so. Yes.
Well, then maybe both need to be.
If I may, Brian, can you share your professional opinion or your colleagues as respect to, does eliminating vinyl siding, wood siding, add protection to the residents?
It would, particularly if you're within a certain, let's say 5 feet from the property line. I would see, yes, that would be less intrusive to your house if you were next to the burning house, yes. But there is so much more you can do to prevent that fire from spreading like wildfire. And that would be to move forward with the ignition-resistant construction, which is very, very restrictive. And there's a whole section in this code book that talks about that.
Well, what would that be?
I don't have them memorized. I could certainly sit down and discuss it with you at a later time, but
Okay, but I do think it would be helpful to have some understanding about what ignition-resistant exterior construction is.
it would be non-combustible siding, like a hardy plank, hardy board, stucco. Help me out, where's something else? Stone, right, a veneer of sorts, yes.
In looking at the city's building code, that is what they call for, and that any other siding is at the discretion of the community development director.
There is no restriction on the siding you can put on a house per the building code.
Okay, hang on a minute here. I'm looking at section 21-7622 development standards. Exterior siding of all dwellings shall be made of non-reflective materials. This is 6. And may include brick, stone, or other masonry materials defined by the city's adopted building code, excluding concrete block, wood, stucco, or other exterior material allowed by the city's adopted building code or approved by the director of the Department of Community Development.
Thank you. That is not the building code.
Oh.
That is the land development code.
Oh, all right.
That
My
I do not,
apologies.
I personally do not enforce that. Community development does, but building safety does not.
Okay, so we don't define any masonry materials in the city's building code?
Define it or restrict it? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm just reading this. It says, brick, stone, or other masonry materials defined by the city's adopted building code.
We don't define those items in the building code.
Okay, so the land development code is making reference to something that doesn't exist in the building code.
From how I would gather, this is the first time I've heard that. I would assume that the land development code refers to the building code so that you can see what materials are allowed or permitted based on what it is that we've adopted. It sounds like a catch-all phrase in the LDC.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on this topic? Councilmember Madera.
I think I need a little bit more on this as to, what's allowable and what's not. Because this is gonna affect basically anyone who replaces the siding on an existing home as well. That's right. And, adding $10,000 to the replacement of siding, especially if you're someone who's not living in one of these areas, that falls into that wildfire, geography, I think it's a little bit harder for me to get on board with this one. So I'm kind of leaning to C, option C, until, you're able to give me a little bit more on, what's the allowable types of building materials? Is this going to be applicable to all homes in the city? Is this something that existing homes are going to have to incur that cost as well? And so, I think I need a little bit more to get me on board with this. So I'm leaning towards not implementing this.
To be perfectly honest with you, I brought this forward to you all because I heard there was some desire for you all to have this in the building code at some point. I personally, my suggestion would be C. The building code already has built in, if you are so many feet within a property line, that your exterior walls have to be fire rated anyway. So the closer you are, the more restrictions you have, particularly with openings as well. The closer you are, the less openings, and it goes by a percentage. And then when you're right next to each other, like a townhouse, obviously you have no openings and you must have a 2-hour wall between the two units. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention that there are options out there if we truly want to explore them. But you bring up really good points that this isn't really sussed out enough at this point. So,
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Madera, one other thing I'd like to point up is this really goes into our open space areas. And one thing I'd like to say is I agree with building official fully, is that we look at maintaining those open spaces, mitigating the issue that we have in those open spaces, and really not going to this part of it of requiring this side, but really looking at our open spaces and making sure the natural grasses don't grow as high as they were in the Marshall fire areas, and looking at doing the mitigation and the prevention side of it to keep that as a minimal if something happens and we get those high winds again, to where we can get in front of it and we can maintain it. And I think that's a big part that we need to look at is that mitigation factor for those areas.
Thank you.
So I have a follow-up question regarding, sir, if you can come back forward, please. Sure. You mentioned previously we were talking about Class A siding materials, Class B siding materials. Does option A up here, requiring ignition-resistant exterior construction, does that involve Class A materials, or is it like more stringent than Class A?
That would be what I consider, the fire code calls it Class A and B, A, B, and C, with A being the most restrictive or the most non-combustible type material. So that's what number A would look at, is that you build with those types of materials, your stucco, your metal roofs, all of that non-combustible type material, that if a wildfire in our area would be like an open space fire spreading to a house, then that would have some protection from the outside so it doesn't go from the outside inside or burn up on top like on the roof in those areas. But yes, that would be what you're looking at there, Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, we do have one of the largest open spaces in the area, less than 1,000 feet from several homes that are sitting out there, so.
Correct.
It was interesting. Okay, Class B material, can you break that down again one more time for me?
So Class B material, it goes into what the code looks at as flame spread and smoke development. So when they do the test on that, they take a piece of material and they set it on fire in a tunnel, and they look to see how far that fire spreads across that material. And that determines what level C, B, or A you fall into. So the farther it spreads, it's gonna be in the Class C, and it's gonna produce more flame spread, plus more smoke development off of that material. And that's where you get into these fire spreading in these wildfires, is basically the embers from that fire spreading and landing on your house or next to your house, setting the bushes on fire, setting your roof on fire. So that's what it looks at, is how long that material it takes to spread across that wood siding or that metal shingle, that if it gets your, I guess answers your question on that side. But it's all done through a laboratory test on what all that material can withstand when you set it on fire.
So some common siding materials like shake shingle siding would be,
That'd be a Class C in the fire code, which would be the worst type of shingle you can have.
cement fiberboard
Cement fiberboard would probably be closer in your A,
in your A, okay.
or your Class 1 by the wildland code.
Stucco's an A.
Stucco, I would guess,
What
would be
about,
an
what
A.
about asphalt shingles?
Asphalt shingles would probably fall into the B,
Okay.
B category, the middle category.
Okay. Stone veneer is an A.
Yes.
Vinyl siding,
Vinyl siding would probably be C.
C, okay. Can you give me an example of a Class B siding that would be used on the side of a house?
I think a Class B would probably be, it might be your wood, your wood lap siding with the paint protecting it. Could be a Class B, or it could be your Hardy Boy cement siding, but I could look that up and get back to you on what those would be.
MDF siding?
MDF siding, I would think that would probably be,
I think it's C.
yeah, it would probably be in their C.
Okay, okay, thank you, that's very helpful. I think there's a middle ground to be had here. I think that requiring A is a little bit tough, especially whenever you consider metal roofs and things of that nature, and probably concrete shingle roofs and things of that nature, and clay roofs, versus C, where you've got the highly flammable and highly spreadable material. But carved out in the center is really this B that I think a lot of homes in this area have already been constructed with. Some
Agreed.
fiber siding and, asphalt shingles and things. I mean, probably what people would consider to be your typical home construction that takes place in an area. So I would be more in favor of not necessarily requiring an A, but ruling out C and not allowing C class products to be there. Oh, wait, we may be getting a correction.
Okay, this is good stuff.
Something you need to share with us?
No, they were just giving me tactic on where I should move next and how I
Gotcha.
should come, so, but just
Yeah.
tactic.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to what the mayor said. I think that's a pretty good standard to set. I know my house is already built that way, so it doesn't seem far-fetched. Can we look for the other variables in kind of siding damage, right? So I think metal roof, you're gonna have to have some reinforcement from a hail perspective. Like, there's a lot of other things that we're worried about, such as wind and, tornadoes and everything else. So it's gotta be kind of that sweet spot, right? Where it makes sense from fire perspective, but it also makes sense in terms of, I'm not putting a new roof on every hailstorm.
I think we can, I hear really good stuff here. I think we don't have to go to the full ignition resistant construction that we proposed here. We can restrict some of these the Class B or Class C construction, from which most of our builders do now anyway. So I think that I think we can come up with a really good middle of the road for here based on your feedback. I will move on then.
Any other comments on this one? Please proceed, sir.
Okay. The next is green construction. We currently, most of our builders do this now, is require conduit. We have the requirement in our commercial code to require conduit to go into the attic and for space in the next to your panel for batteries to be able to be what we call solar ready. Most homes that are built in the city right now do this anyway. It was a clerical error in the last adoption of the code that we missed it for requiring it for residential construction. This is an additional $500 that most builders, we would just make this something that is a requirement that most are doing anyway today. If you were to do it after occupancy, it would be way more expensive to install resident or solar after the fact. It's a pretty small cost. Any questions, concerns, direction? Okay. All right, I'll move on. Next is making your homes EV ready. I see this more on the horizon, to have an added 240 circuit for one per house with a parking space. It's approximately $500 per unit. If you do it after the fact, it becomes closer to $6,000. I think we will all own EVs in the next 20 years.
So you're proposing a 240 outlet for each parking space? So if you have a
No,
three-car
just
garage-
one per unit.
One per unit?
Yes.
I don't feel like this is a necessary requirement.
No,
But no, I say because you look in most of these power panels that are going in, there's capacity in there for another breaker. And so for another 50 amp breaker. So I feel like this is already kind of baked in and it's not necessary as, I don't see this one. And I drive an EV and I don't see this as a necessary thing, you know? I think that, I don't see it.
Any other questions, concerns, thoughts?
Councilmember Noble?
Since it's only $500, we hope, it does seem advantageous. Could it be an option, required option?
Well, this is a required option. We're not asking you to put the charging station in. We're actually just having a new circuit with, just like your dryer. If you were to buy a house without the dryer receptacle in your laundry room, you would have to then have it wired after you move in. And we're just saying that you would have, instead of the receptacle being just in your laundry room, you'd have the same sort of receptacle in your garage.
Okay.
As you see here, so that when you do move in, you can. Now, this could already be an option that builders are offering or that homeowners are asking the builders to add while construction is taking place. This would just codify it and make it a requirement.
On the face of it, I like it. Mayor Huseman, could you explain further about, I'm not clear as to why you don't think it should be a requirement or in the code.
The house that you're gonna, if you purchase a new house, the house you're gonna buy is already gonna have space in that power panel for that. You could have, and look, we say cost to home buyer $500. That's probably not gonna be $500. That's probably gonna be $2,000-3,000 for this requirement to get wired in there. You can go and have this installed in your house should you need to for significantly less. Take advantage of the rebates and the tax incentives that are out there for installing that. If you go by a certain brand, they advertise all over television about they'll install the charger for you for free in your house. So I'm just not seeing this as a necessity in a code to put that out there. And, you know, we are under the assumption that there's gonna be a revolution, that everybody's gonna have one of these cars in the near future. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done for the foreseeable future to ensure that can happen, to include bolstering the power grid. Look at California as a prime example. Whenever it starts getting warm, they tell people don't charge your car. So again, I don't think that this is something that has to be a requirement because the provisions are already gonna be there. It's just a matter of whether or not you're an individual that's gonna take advantage of it, and you're gonna have to run the wiring in there. That's how it goes. It's just like, you know, how about we start requiring an extra outlet there for everybody to have a spa in their backyard?
That's good. I'd like a spa too. I would like a spa and an EV. Would you
You know,
call my
I
husband?
would like a spawn and EV too. The problem is I have one and therefore I can't charge the other. But my point is, I mean, where does it stop? You know, okay, well, you know, now are we next gonna have to require, well, what about somebody who's gonna need another 240 volt outlet in the garage because they've got to power their air compressor or because they've got to charge this or that or whatever. It's a slippery slope and you just get down there. Again, if you're in a position where you need to have this installed, take advantage of the programs that are out there, the rebates that exist, or go buy one of those brands that's advertising about how they'll install the thing for you for free, and you're taken care of and you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you for answering my question.
Councilmember Dare.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of making it a requirement. Maybe a required option, kind of like we did with the sprinklers, and let people decide for themselves.
All right. I've heard enough. I'll move on. Now we're into energy conservation. The new energy conservation code is requiring now for you to put more insulation in your attic. That will save you $12 a year, but could cost you, depending on who did the study, between $950 from the Department of Energy study to $1,400 to the National Association of Home Builders, with vastly large numbers of years before it's paid back. This will become a state mandate by 2025. So it's either yay or nay. I think it's a pretty easy discussion point, but 118-year payback or an 80-year payback. So it's quite large. But right out of the box, this is what the code requires, and this is what the home builders are objecting to.
Councilmember Noble.
Would this help bring down heat in a home in the summer?
Yes.
Okay, that in itself is a yes from me because we get way too hot on the east side. Everybody talks about how hot their homes are and not being able to cool down their upstairs in the summer. And Commerce City is already hot, particularly the eastern side is just going to get worse as time goes on. So I think this is totally reasonable.
Okay.
Councilmember Dare.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to live long enough to see the payback on this, so it's a no for me.
Okay.
I'd say we just wait for the state to implement it.
Understood. I'm seeing some other heads nodding.
Yeah, not to push back on your expertise, but I'm gonna have to counter your argument that this is gonna make the house colder. If I'm only seeing a $12 annual energy savings, that's $1 a month. I'm sorry, but I'm not believing that there are enough BTUs that are gonna be kept out of the house through this to make up for that $1 a month. So I'm sorry, I have to push back and say, I don't believe, especially when you consider the attic is already vented. So the hot air is already gonna rise up out of that attic. You're already sitting at R49, and God, whenever we grew up, our houses were at R12 if we were lucky, you know? And so here we are, we're sitting at R49, we're 4 times what it was whenever we grew up, and that kind of stuff. The fact that we have these houses that are so hot on the second floor, it's because you've got 3 stories of wall that are sitting there getting baked in the sun. To me, it's more important to have that additional insulation on that west-facing wall than it ever will be to have in the attic that is already venting that light up there, or excuse me, that heat up there. So I gotta push back and tell you, I'm not buying it.
Okay.
Oh, and that comes with 28 years of HVAC experience. So,
Okay.
again, I'm not
Fair
buying
enough.
it.
Fair enough. All right, I'll move on then. I think I
Councilmember
got-
Hurst?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'll be quick. I think this is one that the costs will come down with mass supply chain. I mean, the 2025 mandate will drive the cost down then, and it seems to be the right time to jump on.
So does that mean that you're in favor of it or not?
No, not until 2025.
Okay, all right. The next one is continuous insulation on your exterior wall. The code right out of the box says you must have an additional R5 on your exterior wall. It's approximately $2,000 to $5,000. Home builders do not want to do this. It once again will be a state mandate by 2023. You're saving $63 a year. Payback is somewhere between 32 and 78 years. Not quite as extreme as the last one. Foam on the exterior of your house is, I'm not a fan of it. I'll be very blunt with you. For the very reasons that the uniformed people behind me, we talked a little bit about exterior combustibility. That's very combustible.
I think for this one, I look, is the juice worth the squeeze? And unfortunately, it's just not. And none of these options are. I mean, the reality is nothing in stick frame construction is ever going to get you to that point where it is truly, where your payback is truly at that level. And, you know, you can go through and you can do all the green studies that you want to, and none of them support the additional insulation. None of them support things like that. Things that get supported is, you know, changing the way that your HVAC system is designed, and, you know, your lighting and things of that nature. Those are your, what we like to call low-hanging fruit. And those are the things that people really want to latch onto because they make the quickest payback. This insulation, unfortunately, just isn't going to make that payback. And it's still, when you have a 100-degree day and you have 12 hours of sunshine beating on a wall, and that heat is still going to infiltrate no matter how thick that insulation is with traditional stick frame construction. If you start going on to different construction materials on the outside and you start being a little more innovative and everything, but that is so cost prohibitive, it's just it's a no-win situation. So your choice is either continue to live in a high desert or move someplace that doesn't have high desert climate. I'm not in favor of putting this requirement out there.
Anyone else? Okay. The last one is, this is my catch-all. All the other out-of-the-box energy conservation code provisions, we're just calling system improvements. The annual energy savings is $321. You're looking at a 2.5 to almost 4-year payback, depending on whose study you believe. Once again, a state mandate by 2025. I think this one's a pretty easy one. Payback's pretty quick. And the home builders are not opposed to it.
What's current code requiring on the SEER rating?
On the SEER rating, I don't have that off the top of my head.
What are you proposing we go to?
Once again, I don't have that. You're way more versed in HVAC than I am.
Well, this kind of makes it difficult for us to make these kind of decisions whenever we don't know all the information that's coming out there. So whenever you say this, what's your idea? Is your idea that we do away with natural gas? Are you saying we're going to move to all electric? Are we going to keep natural gas? Are we going to require that everything is an AFU rating of 94? Are we going to, what are we trying to accomplish, and what do you think we're going to accomplish for this cost?
Higher efficiency appliances, sealing your attic access panel. It's just a catch-all for a lot of the other small increased efficiency. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add?
Like he was saying, I was just higher efficiency equipment, tighter testing on the ducts on your thermal envelope, reducing the air leakage out of your thermal envelope, stuff like that. That's exactly what this is talking about.
All right, I don't at this time have an issue with requiring tighter tolerances on ductwork and things of that nature. I do take issue with trying to mandate an increase in efficiency on all the appliances for the simple fact that one, supply chain is still crunching everything. And whenever you go forward and you start saying that all these units that are sitting out there on the shelf right now are currently in production are no longer available for installation in the city of Commerce City, you're just going to create that supply chain issue even worse. If there's going to be a mandate coming down in 2025, hopefully the supply chain shortages have cleared up by then. But when you look at the lead time on common things that we used to get overnight, used to get in a week, that is now 4 months out, 12 months out, 14 months out, It just doesn't make sense to start implementing this stuff at this time whenever you still have that uncertainty out there. You want to go forward and you want to make sure that everybody has to make sure the ductworks are sealed as good as possible, and you want to do other sealing and weather sealing. That's great. That only makes sense.
Okay.
Anybody else? I wouldn't go that far. Never claimed to be an expert on anything. Councilmember Dare?
Yeah, I guess that was just my question is, aren't all the appliances going that direction anyways? So,
Yeah, they'll eventually get there.
they're not all at that rating currently that this mandates?
They are. They're available. It's just this would make it more mandatory. Not a lot of jurisdictions are on the 21 code yet. So it's just ramping up.
Okay, I think I'm with the mayor on this one.
Fair enough. That's why I came to y'all. All right, that's all I have. Oh, yes.
Pretty much, I think I'm in support of what the mayor said as well. I think it is important to do the little
Low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit that he was talking about. Like I just did the entryway into my attic as well, because after I used it too many times, it had worn off. But I used my infrared, and it was, quite a bit of leakage of air going into the attic or coming back into the house. So I think that's important because a lot of people don't recognize that as an issue.
Fair enough. There's a lot in this one. I didn't want to waste your time with every single thing that was in this particular, the system efficiency, system improvement. So in retrospect, I probably should have broken it out more, but I'll do that next time.
All right,
That's
sir.
all I have.
Sir, before you go, we have one item that we need to clear up, and I don't think that there was a consensus reached yet on what we're going to do regarding sprinklers. So without taking a vote, we need to be able to provide direction on what we're going to adopt in the building code so that can come before the city council in the form of a resolution or ordinance or whatever it is. So we, as a council, need to have some form of consensus on what it is we're going to do without taking a vote or nodding heads or any of that. Are we good, Ms. Geiger? It's okay, you can just nod.
I think nodding heads is good for direction.
What's that?
I think nodding heads is fine for direction. I miss the nodding heads, though.
Councilmember Noble?
I think we don't know what we're nodding to.
All right.
So we can't nod until we know what we're nodding to.
Yeah,
What is your takeaway, Mr. Foley?
My takeaway from the discussion you had, that I seem to think that y'all were leaning towards requiring residential sprinklers on all new construction. But there are options there are a series of options here, all the way to do nothing and continue to amend it out of the code.
All right, so we're not gonna vote, but Councilmember Ford, do you think that that was the takeaway, that we're gonna require that?
Is that a question?
No, actually, I've seen this multiple years. I'm not opposed to having sprinklers. What I'm opposed to is not being competitive with our surrounding areas. And until we start seeing consensus with Brighton, Thornton, some of our other jurisdictions, I think it takes our housing stock out of proportion with other jurisdictions that are nearby. So I'm going to continue to be a C or D.
Councilmember Davis, I don't believe I heard your opinion.
I think sprinklers are a great option. I do think that we certainly need to offer them as a recommended option, whether it needs to be put into place as a mandatory situation. I'm leaning more towards the C class myself.
Councilmember Dare, if I heard correctly, you thought that making it an option was a good idea?
Yeah, it was a combination of B and C. I think it should be required for townhomes and duplexes, and then an option for single-family residential.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I prefer to make it required for all townhomes and single-family homes, just for the safety in the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Douglas, what was your opinion again?
I'd like to see it required, please, because of all the cluster homes that we have.
Councilmember Noble, what was your opinion?
I was a B and C with drywall, but I am concerned also, now that the point has been raised about Ward 4 has a lot of homes that are being built that are very close together. I don't know, what is the distance between homes now? What is our minimum requirement?
Well, 0. Townhomes are 0,
Well, I understand, but single family,
down to 3.
3 feet?
Now, the land development, the building code has restrictions, but the land development code has further restrictions that I don't know about. So
Your question is the distance between single-family detached?
Yeah, what's the minimum now?
I believe it's dependent on zoning district. I think it's 5 feet is the minimum, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 5-foot setbacks, but I can't, without the code here in front of me, I'm not sure.
From wall to wall?
In most cases, you're gonna find from face to face 10 feet because you typically will find in your zoning a 5-foot side yard setback. So most houses butt right up to that 5 feet. So then 10 feet.
I know a lot of our PUDs have different standards, but it is typically the smallest, I think, is, as Mr. Rogers says, 5 feet from the property line.
I know 5 feet. That's not, homes are much closer than
well,
that.
that's to the property line.
Yeah, I understand. Homes are much closer than that. I can see that in my area. Well, I would say then all,
You'd say, what, ma'am?
sprinklers and all.
Okay.
Mr. Firefighter, can I ask you a follow-up question? Yes, ma'am. We talked earlier about the proximity of a home having an impact on whether or not one fire could spread to another structure.
Yes,
So 10 foot, pretty likely.
pretty likely, yeah. That's when we're in that, what I'm gathering is that 8 to 10% from the house.
So if it were spread out to 15%, could you tell me what you think, or 15 foot, could you tell me what percentage you think it would reduce?
My guess would be between that 10 to 12, because it depends, like I stated, on what the weather is outside and then the radiant heat coming across directly onto that structure next to it. But I think you would increase maybe 2 at the tops, 5, so up to maybe 15%.
So if you're further away though,
Yeah, I'm sorry, down.
You're
Yeah,
further
so-
away.
So
If
you're
I
down
go-
maybe to 6 to 4% of spreading in. Yeah, that one's a hard one because there's so many variables to play into it, but I think you're gonna reduce it just a couple of percentage points by making it 15 foot apart.
okay. Let me throw this out as a idea for my colleagues. If 10 foot creates the greatest risk, then maybe we sprinkler those homes that are abutted that close. But once you spread out to a certain distance, you take that requirement away. And that way, if we're truly focused on, number one, protecting an occupant in a building, but also protecting adjacent structures, because it's whenever the adjacent structure catches on fire that now we have a second alarm come in, then a third alarm, and next thing you know, you have, a cataclysmic event that we don't want to have take place. So if we could prevent that, reduce the risk of that by saying at 15 feet or 20 feet or whatever distance between the adjacent dwelling, you no longer have to have those sprinklers. Would you guys be willing to accept that as a compromise so that we are providing as much protection on the homes that are most at risk while making it an option for everybody else? Councilmember Ford?
I would agree with that concept that anything less than 8 feet side setback would not require a sprinkler.
Anything more than 8 feet.
Anything less than 8 feet side setback. So if you had a 5-foot side setback, as we have today, and you moved that to a minimum of 8-foot side setback, then I would agree that that house would not require a sprinkler.
So you're saying at 8 feet, starting at 8 feet, no, not required, anything less than 8 feet required. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's a compromise on my end, what I threw out there. I don't know what the rest of the council is figuring.
No, I'm just trying to understand
Okay.
your suggestion.
Yep.
Yeah, so to paraphrase, if the setback for the structure to the property line is less than 8 foot, it would be a required sprinkler. If it is greater than 8 foot, it would be an option offered by the builder.
And what happens when it's equal to 8 feet?
8 foot.
I'd say 8 or less. I just don't know which way you wanted to go on that.
Measurable and whole feet only.
Okay, all right.
So any 8 foot, 11 inches is rounded down to 8 foot.
Okay.
Everybody good with that? Anybody? Councilmember Douglas?
Yeah, what happened to 10? I thought,
10.
I thought that you said that 10 foot was the,
Well, keep in mind, that's only half of the separation. That's from the property line to the dwelling is gonna be that 8 foot. So you're actually going to get 16
power
feet
line
of
to the dwelling.
separation.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Now, what happens if one property is 8 foot and the other property is only 5 foot? Now you're at 13 foot instead of 16 foot.
You'd have to measure from the property line.
So would you agree both properties have to be that setback?
No, I think we're splitting hairs.
I
I
know
think
we are.
if your property is 8 feet setback,
Yeah.
that, the other property next door has to be a minimum of 5. The one that has a 5-foot setback has to have a sprinkler, the one that has an 8-foot setback does not. That's my opinion.
Okay. Councilmember Douglas?
Understand.
Why can't we make,
Mayor Pro Tem?
why can't we make it 15 feet then?
It would end up, it would end up being 16 feet total because you have 2 halves of 8 foot. Put them together, you have 16 feet,
Okay.
which our professional firefighters said reduces the risk of fire spreading from one structure to the other. Any other opinions on this? Councilmember Madera?
I think we're making a German car here and just over-engineering the thing. It's keep it simple. It's either required or don't, because you're gonna get to a point where, when people are building these subdivisions, they're, have to do one or the other, and, I think we just gotta make a decision, is if we want one of these up here, because the other thing, when you have 16-foot setbacks, these lots are only so big. And even the biggest lots, right, depending on how they're laid out, do people really want, what the end product of that's gonna be? It's gonna be, you're gonna have a lot of yard and a small house, which you guys are welcome to my house any day. That's exactly what I have at my house. And, I think there's a reason that people go and choose these homes and the products that are offered. And we're really, really changing that with this simple modification.
All right, that's one opinion. Does anybody else have an opinion on the compromise that was proposed? Councilmember Hurst?
I like a compromise always. Yeah, I think, when you're looking at, because I am kind of on the townhouse and duplex requirement, every townhouse and apartment I've ever lived in had sprinklers in them. That's where some of my concern came from, is how often they were having to be worked on, is one of the reasons I'm a little pushback on full-on sprinklers, is that they were always working on our sprinkler system, but it could have just been a fluke. But I do think a requirement of how close it is. You know, obviously we have high winds where there are nights that might not matter how close they are. They could be, you know, 50-foot setbacks. But the closer they are, I mean, we're almost splitting hairs when you start talking about how close you are to your neighbor in comparison to, you know, having your 2-hour wall in a duplex. It's not a whole lot of difference on a even light wind night, you know, between 10 feet house. Because, you know, on a good day, I think I could probably make it to my neighbor's roof. They're that close.
Based on what my colleagues are telling me, if we use the 8-foot rule, most of the houses would require sprinklers. Most new houses would require them because most of them are built to the 5-foot.
Councilmember Davis.
I was all in favor of the agreement to combine the situations. I do think that, to Oscar's point, you start spreading out farther, you either get smaller houses or you get fewer houses on the lot, which then makes the builders decide they want to build to the 5-foot or less, or the 5-foot minimum setback. So I'm in agreement with with your suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Madera.
So I just had a question where the setbacks came from, because didn't you say earlier that the sprinklers were only effective for fires that ignited inside the home?
So the way that the residential sprinklers are, they're a life safety system. So they're designed for you to evacuate your house when there's a fire. So when we have a fire that comes from the outside in, that fire is going to be a lot larger and it's going to produce, like the mayor said, a lot more BTUs or heat energy to when it comes in and breaks a window and comes in or goes into your soffits and stuff. There's going to be a lot more heat and a lot larger fire at that point. These residential sprinkler systems are designed to, just like you saw in the video, is to grab that fire that's inside that room and contain it so you can get out of your house. So that's what this is. So when you look at the Marshall fire, the amount of heat and basically the wind creating that tunnel of fire coming through, it's going to come into your house and it's going to be so hot it's just going to start igniting a lot more than just one room. So that's, I don't know if I explained it very well, but that's going to be a lot harder to stop that fire going through your house when it's got all that other heat and energy already coming in from the outside.
Right, so I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is, you know, if we're requiring the setback and the sprinklers, it's not really gonna be as effective as a deterrent for fires that start outside of the building. And at that point, wouldn't it just be spraying like scalding water on?
Well, what you're gonna do on what they're talking about on the setback is you're gonna prevent, if it starts in your neighbor's inside of your house, you're gonna prevent it from being able to grow, to go through the window and then produce enough radiant heat to start igniting the exterior wall of your neighbor on there. So if your bushes on your house catch on fire, so like during 4th of July when all the fireworks are going on, that is not gonna stop anything. It's gonna burn there. It may protect in that situation, it may protect the sprinklers right inside that window, may protect what's considered a curtain, water curtain, to where it won't have enough heat to come in. So on that type of scenario, when you have a small vegetation fire, it's gonna help protect it from being able to transfer the heat from the outside to the inside. When you're looking at a Marshall fire, when you have so much fire coming in, it's not gonna be able to help you in that situation.
So have we seen a lot of fires spread to the neighbors? You know, the fires that we've seen?
Yes, and usually what happens is you're gonna get that radiant heat that's gonna melt on your neighbor's siding, whether it's vinyl or your windows, the vinyl, the plastic parts of it, or your asphalt shingles start on fire. We have a lot of that happens in our residential fires, to where that heat transfer doesn't actually start the house on fire by the time we get there and we put water on it to cool it down, but it is starting to transfer that heat to where those material are starting to do that combustion process and and possibly start on fire.
So and do we know like how many of those fires were started inside of the home versus outside the home?
Majority, I would say at least 80% are started inside the
And
home.
then these sprinklers would prevent that because,
Sprinklers would prevent that, yes.
thank you.
So to kind of explain that, if my wife is cooking and she sets off the,
Okay, you can say I'm cooking.
I'm looking for a place to sleep tonight in case anybody is so generous. So where we landed on this, townhomes and duplexes, everybody, are we sprinkling those? Yes. Property or a structure is within 8 feet of the property line, it gets sprinklered. Outside of that, it's an option. Well done, everybody. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Thank you, firefighters. Appreciate it. Thank you for everything you do for our community and for keeping our residents safe. You're appreciated.
Thanks, Councilman.
That's all I have.
That's good, because
Anything
we're
else?
only 2 hours behind schedule, but thank you. All right, Mr. Brown, come on down. Next presentation is going to be Facilities Custodial Delivery Method Analysis. I know this is going to be non-controversial, so we should be able to get through this pretty quickly, right?
Thank you. Again, I'm Mike Brown. I'm the Deputy Director of Operations and Public Works. I'm here this evening along with some contracted consultants to provide you specifically a facilities custodial delivery method analysis and recommendations. A brief overview of the presentation this evening. Again, of course, we'll give you the purpose of the presentation, provide you a little bit of background on how we arrived at where we are today. Our consultants will present their analysis and key findings, and we'll have a recommendation for you, and then, of course, lastly, give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So, getting into the purpose, staff contracted with consultants, Truleberg and J.C. Cox with Carroll's Commercial Cleaning, and tonight they'll be presenting findings and recommendations from a city council request to evaluate the city's ability to provide custodial services with in-house employees as opposed to contracted services. And then based on those findings of their analysis, staff will be requesting that City Council authorize the award of a one-year contract with a one-year renewal for citywide custodial services to Town and Country Development Corporation, also doing business as the Key People Company. And that contract for the 2 years total would not exceed $1,085,000 or slightly over that. And then in addition, every year there would be potentially $15,000 additional services above and beyond the normal contracted routine services. And again, so the total aggregate of those 2 years would be just over $1,115,000. Just about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, in October of 2021, the Public Works Facility Division conducted a competitive bidding process where they issued an RFP. They had respondents to choose a contractor to provide the city's custodial services, most of the city's custodial services, in conjunction with some city employees that we do have at the recreation centers. And the Town and Country Development Corporation, or the Key People Company, was the successful bidder in that process. In December of 2021, also staff proposed Resolution 2021-109 authorizing the expenditure for a 3-year contract, which is actually authorization for the first year with 2 one-year renewal options in the total amount for the 3 years of just a little over $1.6 million. And again, in addition, with $15,000 per year for those additional services above and beyond what the routine contract maintenance activities would be. And then City Council did pass Resolution 2021-116 authorizing 1 year of that proposed 3-year contract in the amount of $523,920, again, plus those additional potential services and an amount not to exceed $15,000 for that year.
Can I pause you there for 1 second?
Sure.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I think it's important always just to do a quick high level of what a competitive bid process looks like. I'm not questioning it, but I think it's great to put it out in the public as what
Sure, sure.
what companies must do to compete for these bids, so our constituents understand that it's a very detailed process.
So certainly, so the city's procurement policy would require for any contract that's over 70, it used to be 50,000, now that's currently over $75,000, for the city staff or the city to do a competitive bid process where they issue a formal solicitation from all potential bidders or interested parties. We post that on the city's website, as well as where we get most of our response are from it's essentially a website, an independent website called BidNet. It has a lot of primarily municipal contracts or government contracts. Just about every contractor that does work for a city or has interest in doing work for a city is aware of that. And so again, it's posted publicly. It's usually a two to 3 week response period, and then all those bidders that do provide a response, the city staff, they conduct a review of those proposals, as well as potentially, in some cases, interviews of companies before they finally select a successful bidder or respondent to that RFP.
I really appreciate that. I think it's important for us every once in a while to talk about the amount of detail and time that it takes to get to this point in the contracting or procurement phase.
Certainly, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. So again, after that competitive bidding process, staff did propose the 3-year contract. City Council did pass Resolution 2021 authorizing 1 year of that contract. And with the request to staff, City Council asked that we go and we do an analysis, investigate the viability of providing custodial services at all of the city's facilities with in-house staff, employees. And as a result of that, we contracted with Carroll's Commercial Cleaning. This evening I have Trula Berg and James Cox, both with Carroll's Commercial Cleaning, our consultants that will be providing you the analysis and the key findings of that in just a moment. And so I think that's probably, this would be the perfect time for me to invite Trula, and she will go through her analysis. So just push that forward.
Hi, I'm Trula Berg. I'm with Carroll's Commercial Cleaning. We've been doing commercial janitorial, construction cleaning, project cleaning, special cleanups, remediation, things like that for the past 26 years in Fort Collins. I've been with the company for about 21 years and the owner for about the last 5 now. And my partner, JC, is a financial advisor, as well as having grown up in the business, in the industry, and a family business as well. So we've both had 20 plus years of experience in the industry, as well as some side experience that helps with this analysis for cost analysis reasons as well. So, and so the city came to us with the question of what's the best option. Basically, is what we're doing now the best choice, or is it, another option of potentially changing up the system that they've got? So to get there, we went through the collection of, interviews, collecting the historical information of the systems that they've tried, the different methods, combinations, that stuff that for the last, at least 8 years, and then the previous trouble they had, or, issues and the things that came up prior to that. We spoke to many of the staff that are directly involved with the janitorial, have some of the highest janitorial needs, some of the largest buildings, namely the recreation centers and this building, the Civic Center. They've got anywhere from, 90 to over 100,000 square feet to cover in some of these facilities on a nightly basis. So there's a lot involved. It requires a lot of hours, a lot of staff to take care of those needs in the buildings every night. We also attempted to get some input from the public, as well as a wide variety of staff, but unfortunately didn't get a whole lot of feedback there. We're hoping that because nobody had anything to say, that's generally a good thing. No news is good news. So the method we were asked to analyze first was going with all city employees, with the thought being that if the city could employ the janitorial staff in-house, they could offer full-time benefited positions to, members of the community, ideally. That was, as we analyzed it, it has advantages for sure. That would give the city the most direct control over all of the employees that are going to be in their buildings, all of the staff that's in each one, being able to kind of pick and choose and definitely be assured that they're hiring within the community, if at all possible. When you've got in-house staff, you do tend to have a greater sense of teamwork, just because they feel like they're part of the whole system. When you can include them in, even just in staff meetings and things like that, it's one of those kind of unseen jobs that, they don't necessarily feel included all the time, because they generally tend to work outside of the regular hours. They don't tend to see the other people that are in the building that they're there to serve. But when you have them in-house, you can include them a little bit more in that with a little more flexibility. And then again, being able to provide benefits for full-time employees, if that's the possible, the goal. The disadvantage is it's considerably more expensive, at least 60% more expensive on an annual basis to hire your full janitorial staff in-house, because you have to allow for some extra staff to cover fill-in, people are sick, people are on vacation, that kind of thing. You've got to be able to have the allotment to cover that. That means you've got to have extra staff on hand, which means you've got to try to hire even more people each time that you're going through hiring process, as well as having a high turnover rate in the janitorial industry just across the board. That average is 200%. What we figured with the square footage and the number of buildings that have to be cleaned, that the city would need to have at least minimum 23 full-time staff members to cover the janitorial needs. At a 200% turnover rate, that means potentially the city is looking at having to hire, recruit, clear, hire, train up to 46 employees each year. That's best case scenario. If you consider that when you go to a full-time position versus a part-time position, which is what a lot of contract, and vendors do, full-time position is going to require overnight shifts. So you've got to hire people full-time for graveyard shifts, and that adds a whole nother layer of difficulty in filling these positions in a timely manner. The average time that they've had to fill some of the vacancies for a single vacancy for a building attendant has been anywhere from 6 to 12 months to fill one spot. So looking back at the history of their staffing difficulties with that position, we went almost, from 2013 to 2015, they didn't have anybody in the position for a full year. They were turning over spots, 5 or 6 times, and none of them lasting, and actually most of them only lasting a matter of a month or 3. So those are the kind of struggles they were having at that point. Granted, the conditions of the hiring market that everybody's aware of, I think at this point, it's just really hard to get applicants in. It's hard to get people cleared. The background clearances and things that they're required to have to be in the city buildings, that all adds layer after layer of difficulty in filling full-time positions in a timely and efficient manner. So with the time that it's taking to do that, having them do full in-house, aside from being over 60% more than the other ones, also leaves them at a constant state of hiring and training and turnover. With that, you're also dealing with a lower morale problem because everybody's running a little bit shorthanded because they're never quite able to catch up and be fully staffed for any length of time. When you've got the vendor doing that, and that actually, if you guys are looking at the report, page 5 is the one that's got the full in-house staff and the costs per year on those. And then if you go to a vendor staff, the biggest advantage there is just their ability to hire quicker. Whereas it might take, the process the city is going to go through could take weeks to months to go through recruiting, hiring, screening, onboarding, all of that stuff. A smaller private contractor can do that in a week or two at most. And they also have the ability to hire multiple part-time employees, which allows them the flexibility to have on-call staff available and the ability to have, quicker turnaround on a position when they've got, the staffing changes that need to happen. We got any questions to this point? Okay. The other, the biggest, I guess, disadvantage though, when you're going with, sorry, I'll advance this now. I'm gonna let you hold that. Yeah. So the biggest disadvantage of this is just that the city itself doesn't have the direct control over the staffing. They've got to be really, there's got to be great communication between the city, that's the management that's in charge of the facilities and things like that, and the contractor who's taking care of their custodial needs. You also don't get that sense of teamwork necessarily because these aren't city employees. So you can kind of run into a little bit of a sense of us and them. So you really have to make sure you're working hard to keep that as a cooperative effort and not, treating it as a totally separate entity or kind of a non-entity. So then we have the current delivery method that the city is now operating on and has been for this past full year. And this is the hybrid with using a portion of city staff as well as contracted staff. The majority of it is contracted staff. There are four full-time city employees, and they each work 40 hours a week. There's 2 at each rec center. They alternate days so that one of them is doing Sunday through Thursday, the other one is doing like a Tuesday through Saturday. And they overlap during the day as well. I believe it's a 8 to 5 and then a 12 to 9 shift. So they've got some overlap in between there as well. But for the most part, there's at least one of them in the building every day. And that allows them, and they're there during the day, so that the city staff, Matt and those guys can keep track of what's going on. They can see what's being done. They can direct things and special services and things like that, and keep an eye on those a little closer. The contractor takes in the rest of the buildings and is responsible for most of the overnight or weekend hours, after hours type stuff. Their employees are all part-time, which means they're working shorter shifts, which is another thing about doing janitorial. When you're trying to do it as a full-time job, 8 hours a day, it's a very physically demanding job. So to be able to keep up that kind of pace, they have to slow down a little bit. When you've got the part-time employees, they can keep up a little bit more efficient pace, and that's how you save money quite a bit with the vendor. It's actually not as much in all of the benefits as you would think as it is the savings in man hours mostly. You can still, with the city being in control, you can still hire the employees that you're in charge of. You still get to choose to hire them locally. You still get to, offer benefits for those positions. You've still got that sense of teamwork with the ones that you're in direct contact with every day. And the advantage of having the combination, when you've got the contractor there to back you up with all of the nighttime duties, the things that can't be done during the day. Contractors, for the most part, are going to have multiple contracts. Therefore, they've got a lot of backup fill-in positions available to jump in. A lot of them, if for instance, like the city, you need them to be pre-screened. they've got people that have already been vetted that can, you know, jump in and fill in as needed in those positions, but they also have specialized staff that it costs the city, you know, 2 full-time employees to have somebody around that can take care of the floor care, the carpets, the stripping and waxing, the, you know, tile and grout, all of those kind of things that have to be maintained throughout the year. If the city is gonna do it in-house, they've gotta have a couple of full-time employees just to be doing that on a constant rotation throughout the year. If you've got a contractor that's doing that part for you, they're not only doing it for you in this building, but they're likely doing it for multiple other clients as well. So they have a staff that's just dedicated to that can rotate through. The city gets the advantage of that because they're only paying for the services when they actually need them right then and there versus having to keep somebody around for that kind of thing. The biggest disadvantage is just gonna be that you really, really, really have to make sure that the roles are well-defined, that the communication is really good, because if you start to, you know, if one side starts to kind of falter, the other side is gonna get, you know, they're gonna be picking up the slack, and that can cause issues and strain down the line. But if they've got things going well and cohesion, and they really do, I have to say, after we went through and looked at the buildings, we were pretty impressed with the state of the buildings, especially the rec centers. Those are probably the cleanest rec centers I've ever seen. And they were, you know, the staff has got, everything is really well organized. Everything is, the communication is really good between the two. And the daytime staff is, you know, happy and working along throughout the day and seemed to be, you know, pretty proud of what they were doing. And we came by and kind of talked to them a little bit walking through, and they were happy to show us, you know, what they were doing and happy to tell us, you know, what we, you know, needed to know. And they weren't, you know, kind of disgruntled, you know. You see that a lot with the, you know, janitorial work sometimes, because like I said earlier, it's an unseen job and it's kind of a, you know, a thankless job for the most part. So the fact that they've been able to keep the happy employees and keep the balance is impressive. And that's definitely critical to go with this hybrid model.
Okay, the numbers.
And yeah, the numbers on this they're pretty clear. If you look, the column in blue is the current hybrid model that they're using right now. And that's with 2 full-time folks from the city employee at Bison Ridge and 2 at Eagle Point. The rest of them are staffed by the contractor, which right now is Key People. The column in red is what it would cost the city to do it full in-house themselves. And again, that is best case scenario, because there are some things that we can't necessarily, it's really hard to estimate right now, some of the additional costs you could be looking at, but with the in-house staffing, and you're looking at full-time shifts, like we're talking about the graveyard shifts, you also have to account in that not only are the, you know, the higher salaries and things like that for the people to cover those hours, but you've also got higher utility costs, because the buildings are gonna be, you know, up and lit and, you know, operational, at least, you know, to some degree, for longer periods of time each night. When you're talking about facilities that size, that does add up when it's, you know, 7 nights a week. The contractor-only service, just doing all contractor and having it all done out, is almost identical to the in-house hybrid model that you've got right now with doing in-house and contractor. I would say that's, you know, and because we're having to use averages, $3,000 is negligible for sure, less than 3. So it's definitely the better option as far as price for sure. It's the better option for maintaining quality, because the more consistent the service can be, the higher the quality is going to be. And in order to maintain consistency with those, you've got to have the consistency of staff. So if you can't, you know, if you can't have a consistent staff there all the time to take care of things, then you tend to end up with that roller coaster of highs and lows, where sometimes service is great and then other times you wonder if anybody showed up. So, and that's not a good thing in buildings that are highly visible like this one. So, in our opinion, after all of the years' experience and everything else we've dealt with a lot of bigger facilities like this, it really is the best option that we could find. Looking at the other options would be to continue as the way they are right now with the hybrid model, because it really is, I mean, it's clearly working as we're going through and, and observing the facilities and talking with people. It's keeping the service levels, consistent at a maintained level versus the highs and lows. And with the help of the contractor, it's easier for them to make sure that the staffing levels are being maintained as well. And then obviously we talked about the monetary, and not just the cost of the staffing themselves, but the amount of time that would be spent in hiring and training and constantly dealing with the turnover in those positions would be a significant cost to time and money for the city. One of the main things that we also wanted to point out about the type of vendor that they're using right now, the key people are basically a broker. So they come in and, they've assessed what they need and everything in the building. They've gotten the contract with the city. They then employ subcontractors to do the jobs throughout the city. That means that you may not have the same subcontractor taking care of one of the rec centers as you do the civic center or the little cultural center. Well, the benefit to that, which it sounds confusing, but actually, if you have a problem in one building, you can talk to the broker that's got the contract about changing out staff or the subcontractor at that location. You don't have to go through that whole RFP situation that Mike was just telling you about, which can be lengthy and time-consuming and, quite an expense for everybody involved. So that's definitely one of the bigger, I guess, pluses to having that kind of vendor out there, is that helps with not having to go through the whole process all over again. If there's an item, you can address it, on a micro scale versus having to go full bore to a whole new RFP. And then the other things we did, as we were walking through and making note, we wanted to make sure we noted anything that might help in addition to that along the way. We did recommend that they would install the command center dispensing systems, which are basically a system for dispensing the cleaning chemicals that is mounted in each of the buildings in the janitorial closets, just to make sure that the chemicals are being dispensed in the right concentration, the right dilution ratios. That's one of the bigger money wastes in commercial janitorial, is people over-mixing chemicals and wasting, basically, and then also causing issues with finish and things like that. Sometimes to floors, if you're over-mixing chemicals, using too strong, you can do damage to the floor finish. You've got to be redoing floors more often, which is another added expense. So most of the buildings had those. There were a few that did not. Adding that in those other two would be a huge help. And also just making sure that there's a little bit more storage available in all of the janitorial closets. The ones at the rec centers were phenomenal. I don't want to call him out, but he might have OCD, because those were just, everything was in line. Everything was, the order slips were there, the labels were there, everything was perfect. So even coming close to some of that, and it does help as well in those to make sure that the more organized the station for your cleaning supplies, the more organized your closet, the easier it is to keep the building looking the same way. So those are the ones we found.
There we are.
Yep.
Thank you. So, based on the analysis, key findings and recommendations from our consultants this evening, the staff will be requesting, again, City Council authorize award of a one-year contract with a one-year renewal option, which would be the second 2 years of the 3-year contract initially that the key people proposed or bid on. And again, for the citywide custodial services. And then again, base amount of that contract not to exceed slightly over 1.085. With that, we would open it certainly to any questions that council may have.
First, I want to start, thank you, ma'am, sir, for being here. I think that your analysis was very well laid out. I appreciate the time and attention that you put into it. For somebody who's probably not used to standing in front of a city council and giving presentations, I think you did a phenomenal job. So thank you very much for everything that you did for this. Can you go back to that slide that just showed, back one slide, please? So I'm curious if the base amount of the contract's not gonna amount to or exceed $1,085,000. Well, we got a period in there instead of a comma, so it's throwing my public math skills off a little bit. But $1,085,661.12, and we cannot exceed $15,000 per year for additional services. My public math would tell me that equates to $1,100,661.12. But this says we can't exceed $1,115,661.
15,000 per year.
What's that?
15,000 per year, so for a total of 30,000.
I'm trying to add the two numbers that are up there. There's a number up there for $1,085,000 and another number up there for $15,000. And when I put the two together, I come up with $1,161.12. I'm trying to square the math that's being done up there, and I'm struggling to do so.
Yeah, it's 30,000 on top of the 1,085,000 because that 1,085,000 is for 2 years worth of the contract. And then it's not to exceed $15,000 per year for the additional services above and beyond the base contract amount for the programmatic maintenance activities.
So that $1,085,000 is not an annual cost?
No, that would be 2 years.
That's for 2 years.
Yes, that would be the remainder of the 3-year
Okay.
proposal.
Now we make a lot more sense. Thank you very much. Great. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Can you go back to slide 14 where it mentioned the command center? Because you explained what it is, but what does that cost and how many would we need within the city?
So, command centers are, like we mentioned, pre-mixing systems. I think that's not lost on you. What the cost is, typically, oftentimes, you'll see the producer of these chemicals that are willing to come bring these dispensers in for you, because it kind of guarantees that in the future, should you need to order, you already have their pre-built systems in. Other times, we've seen costs right around about $500 per unit is what we've seen as far as a typical command center if we're paying out of pocket as the city here.
So do we know approximately how many we would need?
From what we've counted, we only spotted 2, just 2. Yeah, and those actually both were the MSC, if I remember correctly.
Okay, and is that included in that cost, that the 1 million something, or is that in addition if we have to purchase those?
That would be in addition. We would have to purchase those.
Okay, and then on the slide, I forget which slide it was, but where it says doing business as, can you go back to where it says, I'm confused as to what that means, doing business. It says Carroll's Commercial Clean, but then it says the key, there was a, what's that? Is it 2 different companies or?
Yeah.
Carroll's Cleaning, yeah, they're the consultants that did the analysis for us. The Town and Country Development, doing business as the key people. The key people would be essentially their subsidiary of that bigger Town and Country Development. It really has more to do with the way that they're registered with the Secretary of State's office as a business.
Okay, and then, well, another question, and this may go back to HR, but when was the last time any of these positions posted within Commerce City, just for Commerce City on our website? All of the
custodial positions.
All of them, yes.
I'm gonna have the Parks, Recreation, and Golf folks come up. They are Parks, Recreation, and Golf employees currently.
Yeah, or when when was the last time they were all published to or open to the public instead of a company?
All the positions are always open to the public.
Well, no, because you just said, I thought you just said in the presentation that you guys have been using this company, so if we got rid, when was the last?
I'm sorry, so the last time that we tried to fill all positions and do it in-house.
Exactly.
The best analysis we have is, it's been about 8 years that we've been doing it with a contractor to some level.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not just saying in-house, but to the public, period. You know, Commerce City posted on our website.
Well, what I can tell you is that I think the folks have indicated that just in recent years, it's taken between 6 and 12 months to fill one position, which are those daytime benefited positions, not the overnight graveyard positions. They can attract some folks for a full-time daytime position, but the nighttime positions are extraordinarily difficult to fill. But I believe there has been one advertised recently that they were able to fill fairly quickly, but the average prior to that has been 6 to 12 months to fill one of those daytime positions.
But you did say it's been 8 years, correct, since it was?
We've been using a contractor to some degree for about the last 8 years.
Okay, because I just think it's sad too that we always talk about bringing other businesses to the city, and, you know, Commerce City could be one of the biggest employers, and we're giving this money to these other companies before we, you know, post it to the public and see what residents residents within our community, to the surrounding communities and cities would want to try.
We were put in a position of using a contractor because we could not hire people.
Yeah, but that was 8 years ago.
They were posted wherever any other positions were posted. We just simply can't hire people.
Okay, but you just told me though that was 8 years ago, because you didn't even try again since it's been 8 years. But can I finish talking a second, please? But I also just don't understand, like, if we don't give our residents a chance, then who will? And I also wanted to ask another question. Does your company provide the ones that are working with this contracting company, do they get full benefits?
We can't really answer that necessarily because we don't employ any of those folks, but from what I understand, most of them have minimal benefits in those positions because they're part-time. So they're probably more like a paid time off, paid sick leave, that kind of thing.
Okay. And then, see, that's something I would have liked to know as well. Are these employees even being treated fairly? And then, do we know approximately what their hourly rate is or their yearly salaries?
We do.
All of that's in the report, actually. That's part of your packet.
And the report on the page is in the, towards the back, we had included some information to kind of explain the numbers in the tables there as far as what we figured out for the costs for the contracted service. And
so it's on record. Do you know what that is? Can you tell me what that is?
So the average costs, or the average wage, hourly wage that we found with the contracted employees was anywhere from $15 to $18 an hour, depending on the building that they were in. And some could be a little higher because some of them were paid on a per visit basis versus a per hourly, especially for the smaller buildings. But from my understanding, I don't believe any of them were full-time employees. I believe they're all doing this as a second job probably, or, you know, as a side job or an additional income. A big part of that is that when you have the wage range that we can offer out, you know, that anybody can offer out for janitorial service, average right now is around 16, a little over 16 an hour. The city starts their janitorial employees around $18 an hour. And that's a full-time benefited position for those guys. So anywhere from 18 to 21.65, I believe, is what we found. But, and especially this past year, prices and everything else have gone up so much that a full-time person, even earning at the higher end as a janitorial wage, is not enough for a person to live on. And the problem is, in order for us, if we were hoping to pay someone a full-time salary that they could actually support a family and live on, nobody could afford to pay the janitor that much. So making janitorial a full-time job is also difficult, not only from the physical aspect we talked about earlier, but also financially, which is why most of them do this as a second job, as a supplemental income to a higher paying primary income.
So that's, like I said, back to my concern, if it was a city job, maybe we could possibly offer them more benefits and more pay. And I'm just curious for our previous HR director, Armando, when you were in the director of HR positions, when was the last, did you post any of these positions?
So we did. We just actually recently filled one of those positions. But if you recall, it's a hybrid. So there's only 4 full-time positions that the city employs that actually do this type of task. And the other ones are obviously the hybrid and they're contracted. So there's
Okay.
only four full-time positions.
Okay, and do you know what they make hourly?
Not at the top of my head.
Is it at least minimum wage?
It is. It's above minimum wage. We actually did an equity adjustment and looked at all that, so it is above the $18.
It's on page 12 of the report. There's a chart at the bottom.
Okay, and then also in the report, out of the 1 million something, how much money did your company get out of that 1 million?
Us?
Yes, or what did the city pay your company? And is that included in the 1 million?
We don't provide any custodial services to the city.
Well, can staff answer then the
I'm sorry,
contractor? How much were
The
they?
folks here this evening are with Carroll's Commercial Cleaning. We hired them as a consultant to do the analysis. They're independent. They don't have any contract with the city to provide custodial services. They just did the analysis. They
Okay,
were
but if
paid,
they were
paid
hired-
$30,000 to do that analysis, but it's separate from the key people.
Okay,
They're
and
not
how
the
much,
same.
since they were hired, how much were they paid?
I'm sorry?
Since you did say they were hired, how much were they paid?
They were paid $30,000 for the analysis. We've paid 50% of that to date.
Okay. Then one last question, if you can go back to the slide with the contour, where it broke down where the employees work. I was concerned, which one is the contour? Can you go back to that slide where it broke down the expenses?
Oh, the table.
Yeah, where it says the Contour Community Center, where is that at?
Oh, I realized that some of our labeling said Contour Community Center and some of it said the Cultural and Historical Center?
Yes, it's the cultural and historic. It's the historical and cultural center at 60th and Monaco. Previously, it was called the Contour Community Center.
So that's not part of the Contour Estates?
It is not.
Okay. So but that's the part also where the museum is and this cleaning company pays that then to have that museum cleaned?
The Contour Community Center is one of the city's facilities or buildings that's part of the contract that the key people currently provide custodial services for.
Okay, and then which is the part where it says miscellaneous admin, parks, and fleet?
That's the municipal service
Or
center.
that's oh, okay,
So that's the
gotcha.
3 buildings that are combined into that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Huseman. Wow. So I'm a little bit thrown off by all of this. So when you said that the cost would go up as far as having the lights on in the building or to have the utilities available, wouldn't that be the same as if you have contracted people in there?
Actually, that was just one of the additional charges that we aren't able to really put a finger on, but the difference is that the contractors people are working, they have more people working a shorter shift. So they're putting in the same amount of labor hours, but they're putting their hours in, say at the at the recreation center, they may be there from say 9:30 to 12:30, and then they're done because they have 4 or 5 people coming in and working that amount of time. Versus if if the city was employing full-time staff to be there from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., then they're in there cleaning throughout the building And so then, there's a little bit more utilities involved each night when you've got people working a full 8-hour shift in there versus everything being shut down in 3 or 4 hours.
So what, I guess this, Mike, this is more for you. Why couldn't we have part-time employees as well? Wouldn't there be a lot of people from the city who might want that extra money to work a part-time job?
Certainly, I don't know that we've ever advertised for part-time employees. Currently, we can't get people to apply for full-time jobs. The challenge that you have if we were to try to do it with all part-time employees is as was indicated in this particular industry, there's a significant amount of turnover. Our current vendor, again, they work with a lot of subcontractors who have very large pools of staff that when there's a shortage, when somebody's out sick or somebody's out on injury leave, or there's just an issue or a problem, they have a large pool of employees that they can pull from to go to from one contract to this contract to service us. Whereas if we had to hire 20 or 30 part-time employees to be able to make sure that we could cover every time somebody was sick or every time somebody quit or every time somebody couldn't make it in, or for all those other variety of reasons why folks don't make it to work. So when you have a contractor that has a large pool of employees, they can cover those shortages very quickly and very easily, whereas we as the city, if we hired that many full-time employees, we would have to way overstaff, way overhire those part-time employees. And again, the real challenge here is that we can't get people to apply for the full-time positions and remain employed in the full-time positions.
How long have the full-time employees been here, the 4 that are employed?
Yeah, so in the report, let me find what page for you. We do actually have, page 3, a listing of all the employees that have been hired full-time from 1984 through 2015, when it transitioned over to a more contracted employee situation. You can see the trending starting in 2014, kind of the beginning of all these problems, where you have folks that have been hired and they're on board for 21 days, in one case for 2 days. You finally had someone in 2014 that almost made it a full year from 362 days, but then every position after that was filled for 28 days, 77, 24 days. They just, as indicative of this type of job, there is a lot of turnover, and it's just inherent into kind of what these roles are. That kind of colors the situation, I think, has been kind of beset here, is that with the key employees or the key people company, one of the greatest benefits that helps you as the city is that, as mentioned, they are a broker of several different other subcontractors. And so you're not only getting one large pool of employees, you're getting a large pool of employees that can be switched in and out from probably 3 to 4 other separate subcontractors. And so if you would like to continue having buildings as clean as they are and your needs being reacted to as quickly as you possibly can, it's nice to know that it's as simple as a phone call rather than posting a job ad and hoping that someone's going to be able to be hired within 3 to 6 months. In some of the interviews that we conducted, we were able to kind of hear about some of the woes, especially a specific position that might have been what was just filled at the recreation center. What was discussed with us is that we had folks where they posted a job on the city website. They had a mix of good and poor applicants as far as that went. And then the city's process of going through the hiring was sometimes so slow that by the time they were able to offer a position for a full-time for this employee, they've already found positions elsewhere because they just needed to get hired sooner than the city was able to move at that point.
So they bailed on some of the pre-qualifications, like the drug tests and the background checks.
Yeah. So, I think the city has been trying for quite a while to emphasize its ability to hire in-house, but I think that has just been met with difficulty after difficulty in just the logistics of finding people that either want to work full-time or that need the benefits or that just are able to fill that role.
What about reaching out to like ASME, they're already they represent a lot of the workers here in the city, and they cover janitorial services. I mean, that be a good source for finding people who want the job?
ASME would certainly represent any of those hourly custodial employees once they became a city employee. But again, they would still be a city employee. We simply can't get people to apply for these jobs and keep these jobs. My personal belief is that it's commendable and desirable to try to hire Commerce City residents and provide full-time jobs with benefits. And I think that would be everybody's desire.
And part-time jobs too.
We have a large number of part-time employees. Again, unfortunately, though, we would have to significantly overhire that number of part-time employees because there is so much attrition and so many challenges with keeping fully staffed on any given night. But again, where a contractor has a large pool of employees that they can pull from to do that.
I hope they're being paid well, because I've cleaned for a living, and I can tell you that, you know, if I were offered $25 an hour and I needed that, I would take that job to pay my bills. I would do that. I know it's a hard job, but, you know, in today's market, $18 is, you know, you can go work at a fast food place for that.
I believe that the rate that was recently offered was higher than the average or the industry average.
Yeah, I saw it. It was
higher.
$18. It's
Slightly
in the
higher.
report.
And we did discuss with the HR department in having an elevated hourly wage for this particular position in an attempt to try to attract people. Unfortunately, that has a domino or snowball effect on every other position within those similar pay ranges.
I have a hard time with some of the costs here, and I would love to see what their labor costs there is for the contractor. However, that's probably not something that I'll be privy to, but like the Derby Community Center and Connor Community Center. So I am a member of the Historical Society, and I used to sit there and have so we could have the museum open. And part of my duties there was to clean. So as a volunteer, I cleaned. The Derby Community Center, I know I've used that facility before, but now it's not really accessible to the community. That is overseen by the Economic Development Department, and then you have to have city staff there if you're going to do anything there, but we always had to clean that ourselves. And so some of this is an overreach for me, but thank you. I don't have anything else.
Councilmember Madera.
So a lot of people don't know this about me, but I was a janitor once in my life, and it is hard work, and you know, especially the overnight shifts where you go in late and you know, the sun's coming up sometimes when you're leaving work, and so you know, it's very commendable, and thank you guys for this presentation. It was very detailed, and you know, especially your other packet that you put together for us was very helpful. And thank you to Parks and Rec and the staff that we have on hand. You know, not a lot of people compliment the janitorial services and our custodians, and they do a great job when you walk into these buildings and the rec centers, and you know, so very much appreciate that. I think your guys' analysis is pretty spot on, you know, just based off of the numbers. You know, like my colleagues, I wish we could pay everyone more, and you know, when I was doing it, I was making like $8, maybe $9 an hour. So it's something that does have a high level of attrition because it's more of a kind of make ends meet. You know, I did it during college. People that I work with did it for a variety of different reasons usually until you can find something better, right? And I think, you know, that's the reason why a lot of these are contractors or subcontractors, because you really have to have that constant replacement for the attrition, and you have to have your crews, right? So it's, you know, I think we brought it up with the hiring in the city and how a lot of people found other positions before we could even make an offer. And, you know, I just see if we bring it in-house, that now becomes something that we have to hire someone in HR just to keep, you know, these staffing levels up and go and recruit and make sure that they have the proper training. And so, you know, that's not something that I want to bring in-house, especially if it's something that is working currently. You know, my motto is if it's not broke, don't break it. So I appreciate your guys' recommendations, and you know, I hope that we take all those considerations and make those additional recommendations that you guys made.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I'd be in support of offering the 1+1 contract. I would say in that same time, I would look into the opportunities to work with our contractors and our subcontractors on the possibility of having an MBE, WBE, DBE, SBE requirement built in to the contract with them. Like maybe, you know, 30% of their work has to come from a minority business enterprise or a women-owned business enterprise or something along those lines, so we can make sure that the companies that we're doing work with align with the goals of this city council.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add again, I don't agree with any of that because the city hasn't even looked into this, it seems, since apparently the last 8 years, so I don't agree with it.
A couple of questions that popped out to me as we were going here, and we were talking about the length of time it takes to hire a city employee, given the fact they've got to go through background checks and things of that nature. And then we talked about how we get around that by the fact that we've got a contractor who has a pool of employees and subcontractors, that if somebody is sick and can't come to work, somebody else from a different contract can come and fill in. So my question on that is, what kind of background check is being done on these contractors who are in our facilities after hours with no supervision? What kind of background check is being done on a substitute employee who comes out here as part of that pool? Do we always know who that substitute employee is? Are they issued their own badge? Or are we badge sharing at the contractor level? What safeguards are being put in place by the staff that is overseeing this contract to make sure that the people in the building are the people that should be in the building and the people that are not in the building should not be?
So the contractors themselves, as a subcontractor, I can verify for you that when I go to do a background check on an employee, I can get a background check on an employee done in a matter of days. Maybe even, you know, the same day, depending on the depth that's required for the job. And I don't know what it is about the city process, if it's just the layers that they have to go through to get there, that takes considerably longer, but it's, to my understanding, from the one we talked to the vendor, key people, and their subcontractors, that they've all been through the background check process that's required by the city for them to be in the facilities, and that they have additional staff that have also passed that background check and clearance available as fill-ins. So I would assume that it's a type of roster type system that they've got, you know, so many employees available for the fill-in spots. So depending on which building it is, as to which subcontractor has that one, they've got people that have been cleared for the level that's required in that building, so.
I would also just add to that, for their specific areas within the police department that requires an even additional clearance to be able to access those areas. And I believe there are specific identified employees to do that, that have that additional clearance.
Okay, so I appreciate that, but again, what oversight from the staff level is ensuring that the custodial worker that comes here tonight is actually somebody who has been cleared?
I think that's a good question, and we should probably put something in place to verify that with some frequency, because I don't know that we have. Other than the contract itself, and it has some specifics in there pertaining to the specific requirements that any employee that is a any employee that works for a subcontractor that works for the city. And I'm sorry I don't have that contract language with me, but I know there's some in there. But I believe that's a good question, and there probably should be something in place to do some sort of periodic spot checks to ensure that they're not potentially substituting somebody in that maybe doesn't have the clearance for a specific building or specific area.
Okay, thanks. I struggle with continuing the path that we're going. You know, when I think of the employees that are coming in here and cleaning, I'm thinking of that parent that kissed their kid goodnight, jumped in the car, came down here, did work for 8 hours, tried to rush home so they could be there for breakfast and get the kid off to school. And, you know, the big thing in benefits and salary and everything is this total rewards, you know, where people aren't just looking at what is the actual dollar that you're paid per hour, but also what are the benefits and, you know, what are the fringes that go on top of it. And I know the city is very generous in the benefit package that is offered to the employees, more so than any contractor is offering. So even if it was, you know, across the board, $18 an hour for the contractor to come in here and $18 an hour for that city employee to be here, you're still providing an opportunity for that city employee to go home with a level of benefits that they would not get with their contracted employee. And if they did get with the contracted employer, it would be at a significantly higher cost that all too often is cost prohibitive, especially for people that are in this wage bracket. So I struggle with you're taking money that is generated within the city and you're paying it out, and we're giving it to a contractor who, number one, isn't even within the city, so there's no additional benefit to the city by paying this $1 million to this contractor. But you're also not providing those opportunities for these employees to get a leg up. And I put all that together, and I just think there's got to be a way that things could be done better. And I don't know that it starts with an instant, we're going to flip off the contract and try to hire everybody, but maybe it's a commitment over the next couple of years to actually start ramping up those city employees, where you're always going to have that backfill of the contractor in the event that you need it. Or maybe, you know, we get to a point where our goal is 50% city employee and 50% contract employee. Maybe the goal is 75-25, whatever. But I think when you make a commitment out there that you are actually having the safeguards of that contracted position, but also doing so in a manner that helps to lift your community up and the residents who live in the community who need these kind of positions, the additional work, whatever it is, the benefits, things of that nature, and a way to get it. I think we can do better than just continuing with this contract there. Once again, though, we're 2 meetings away from the end of the year, and we're kind of in this position once again for the second year in a row of needing to make a decision. And that decision is approve the contract for us or not have custodial services January 1st. That's an unfortunate position to be in. Councilmember Noble.
I apologize for having left the room, so if anybody has already asked this, just let me know and I'll take my question back. I see that the annual labor cost is $765,000 or so. There's 2 years left, so you would do 2 times $765,000, which gets a person to 1.5 million, but that isn't what we're looking at here.
You have 4 city employees that are counted into that as well.
Yeah, about 220-some thousand of that would be the city employee portion.
Okay, so even on the last column, it was 768,000.
That would be all contractor.
Okay, so the 1.5 million includes the 4 city employees? And that increases it by 300,000 a year?
The 1.085 million is for the contractor, and only the contractor portion for those 2 years. The remainder, roughly $220-some thousand, would be in the blue column there, would be the city employees. If we were to do it all contract in the green column, then the cost is roughly the same.
So the portion that you're looking at in the blue column there at the 765.83, that includes 4 full-time employees' wages for the city, which come out to roughly 200 and, little over 205,000 for the year along with that. So if you're taking that part out, then you're getting the portion that is just to the contractor.
Okay, I see that. Thank you very much. That helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate everything. All right, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, sir. It's that time of the year again that we are bringing forward our Q3 update for the work plan. That's the item that's on the agenda tonight. As we have started our new practice, we have not been going through the presentation. The report is in your packet if you have questions. But I think overall what I would like to share with you is that we are making progress across your 5 goals over the past year. We're 71% plus or minus on track. There are some major disruptions, and some items have been canceled, mostly due to obviously supply chain or other disruptions with respect to that. But overall, we are staying dedicated towards the 5 goals and what's been slated for us for this year. And we'll be bringing Q4 before you all at the turn of the new year.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody have any questions concerning the 2022 work plan update? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. I read through it, and I would really love to see, based on BREDAC's input, more aggressiveness on the economic development front, as opposed to being receivers, but to push. You know, be more aggressive. Frontline aggressive, as opposed to waiting for somebody to call or participating in a, you know, it's something more active than passive.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, we will move on to reports. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, sir. So just a couple quick items so that we can keep you moving through the night. Just to make you all aware, we have a joint ribbon cutting between the city, the URA, and the developer for the D2 multifamily development and park dedication scheduled for December 8th at Mahi Greyhound Park. A couple of other items, I think, just to show some trends with where we stand year to date with residential units approved. In 2019, we were at 630, and in 2020, we were at 1,138. And then last year, we were at the staggering number of 1,619. Year to date, where we stand today, we're at 1,044 units. So not as high as last year, but still rather up there when you think about it over the last 3 or 4 years. For public works, we're coming to the tail end of our pavement management flat work. The remaining work to be done out of this year's program is 112th Avenue between US 85 and Havana, crossing the UP. Right now, we believe to have it complete by the end of the month, but we don't know what the expected date of that is yet, but we do plan to have it done. We also have ordered no parking signs for Niagara. We are hoping to have those installed once we have those in stock and in our hands. But PRG, we have the run with the Buffalo, just kind of run with the Buffalo turkey trot kind of numbers coming out. We had 100 participants on a very chilly morning, I would say. $275 was raised from raffle prizes and for Project Present. We have 2 special events left for the year. One being the dance recital November 20 between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. at Adams City High School. Tickets are required and can be obtained at both recreation centers. And then we also have Cereal for Santa December 10th, 9 to 12 at Bison Ridge Rec Center. That event typically sells out very quickly and is very popular within our community. And it also requires registration. So if who's listening at home, if you haven't signed up yet, jump on your computer, get on our city website, get registered. We'll also make sure to get that information out in our city manager update. And with that, that's my report.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Rogers? Seeing none, is any council members wishing to make a report? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you so much, Mayor Huseman. I attended the Airport Coordinating Committee meeting. This is important because it is the Aerotropolis economic development effort that is between several different municipal governments and the county government as well. They did finally receive the portion of this effort from Denver, which has taken 2 years, approximately. There will be the marketing committees starting up again. Our representatives will be from our Economic Development Office, and we continue to meet quarterly. There was some talk also that potentially Denver has been buying property around the airport, and so there was discussion about how that is going to be monitored. There's quite a complex history about what has occurred since the 80s, and I would like to have the staff send that out to all the council members so that they can see where we've been with the airport, the agreements that the county has made, the votes that were taken by the community at large, and other agreements that have occurred over the years. I also met with a representative of United Neighborhoods, who has been working with the families at Village Crest, Senior Commission meeting, and finally Adams County Regional Economic Partnership, which is when the speakers were on affordable housing this month. It was a development council meeting. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine's just pretty quick as well. I also last Thursday attended the Senior Commission meeting, and Friday I also met with Alex Luna from United New Economy in regards to continuous ways to reach out to help the residents living at Village Crest. That's all I have. Thank you.
I was also New Economy. I had the wrong name. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you. Yes, I also met with Alex from UNE, United New Economy, or for New Economy, and that was a good meeting. Attended the Veterans Day celebration at Eagle Point, and that was great to intermingle with some of the veterans, and there were a lot of seniors that came, and it was a great time. So I was really glad that I went to that. I also attended the Housing Authority meeting as an alternate, and just one last thing, and that is able to help a constituent get through a very, very stressful time of facing eviction and facing going to court, facing not knowing if this person was going to be homeless or not. And it was very, very eye-opening, to say the least. This is not an uncommon issue. People are struggling. They don't have enough money to make ends meet, and there's not enough help out there to help people who face something that is completely out of their control. And I spent hour after hour after hour trying to find this person help. And if it weren't for my real estate background, I probably wouldn't have gotten her through it because I had to negotiate. But this person couldn't have negotiated on their own. And so I was very, very happy to be able to help, was more than happy to be able to help. But I can tell you that this person shouldn't have been put in that position to begin with. You should be able to speak up about things that aren't right without worrying about retaliation. It's wrong. The system is working perfectly for the people who designed it, and it is so broken for the people on the bottom. So I'm glad to be in this position to be able to help people. But there are a lot of people out there who need help. And rents are too high. People can't afford them. It's way over their means to be able to pay. And we wonder why we have a homeless problem. These are people on fixed incomes. These are people that are disabled. These are people who have mental illnesses. Something's got to give. And I hope that more people can get into office to change the narrative and to recognize the issues that ordinary people face on a daily basis so that we can change the paradigm. Thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
Not so much a report as a question for all the council members that met with, was it Neighborhoods United? As to like what's being discussed, what is coming out of those meetings. You know, I think for reports, we really need to focus on informing the rest of council and about, you know, things that we need to know as a body and, you know, actions that we can take instead of, you know, just reporting our calendars. So I'll throw the question out there to those about what's been discussed in those meetings and what's come out of them, if there's any proposals or anything that council can take up as a whole.
Councilmember Noble.
Sure. So Mr. Luna has been working with the Village Crest families. You'll remember, Councilmember Madera, that they came to the city council meeting to speak to all of us. I know that Mr. Luna would very much like to speak with you as well, but I think that you haven't been able to make a connection. There was no particular policy suggested. He's having a community meeting a week from Saturday. No, this coming Saturday. And I've been invited to participate in the community meeting, and so I will be attending. As I reported on the Airport Coordinating Committee meeting, when there is something for us to know, I will definitely share it. But at this point, there isn't anything, and I'm going to a community meeting to learn more from the families who are impacted that people like Councilmember Douglas was referring to.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And also, just for clarification, Councilmember Madera, when we do meet with at Mr. Luna, it is to address residents' concerns, and I was made aware that he has attempted to reach out to me with you as well, and then I also sent you an email. Mr. Luna asked me to try to see if he could talk to you as well. The meeting this November 15th, he has asked Annette, I believe, to invite all the council members as well. So, if you want to know what he has to say, maybe, and what these meetings are about, maybe you should have a meeting with him as well. Because I do know he has personally told me that he has tried to reach out to you, and I sent you an email as well, and I didn't get a response.
Okay. The personal attacks aren't necessary, but, I have reached out and, we haven't been able to make our calendars align. But, and I'm open to meeting with Mr. Luna. I think, more importantly is we just have to, when it comes to these issues that affect the entire city, we have to discuss them as a council and not individually. So, we all take meetings, but if you're going to have a report, report on how, the how, the what, the why, the where, the when, instead of just reporting that, we had a meeting, because that's not really helpful to the rest of us. And, if one person's had a meeting, they can disseminate that information to the group as opposed to having 9 separate meetings with 9 different directions that we're going. So that's why I asked the question of, what is it about these meetings? What's been discussed? Because, we're all there for that Village Crest city council meeting when they came in, and I think it affected all of us, especially, some of us that can relate, that grew up in some places like this, that was what we could afford. So, I think everyone wants to help. It's what can we do? And, the last thing that I want us to do is take these meetings and make false promises and mislead about what we can do and what we can't do. And so that's, why I wanted to gather the information. I was actually invited to visit one of the residents, and when I asked if I could bring the Housing Authority director, they shut me down. So, I know that Mr. Luna and the Housing Authority director have been working closely together to really understand all the issues that are at this location. And just a little bit of history on Village Crest is it's not a partnership in that we help the developers build this. We entered into a partnership to help them rehab this property, which, and allowed them to take out tax-exempt funding and, to really drive the financing for that. So it is very disappointing that these units weren't rehabbed like they should have been. So, that's definitely an issue that we need to take. But, as a city, it really comes down to a policy issue. And we don't have any kind of landlord or renter type ordinance, as we discussed in the past. So that limits the ability that we have to enforce some of these things. And so if it's an issue that we want to take up, we have to take it up and just stop talking about, the things that are going on. So, I welcome bringing it up on an agenda, but, let's actually do something about it.
Councilmember Douglas?
So I met with Mr. Luna last Thursday. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was at the Reunion Coffee House. We discussed the possibilities of setting policy at the Capitol with legislators to bring bills forward to take action, actually. And he had a resident from Village Crest who was there, who actually provided written testimony. So that was, she was along, she did not speak English. She basically shared her struggles with me. She has an autistic daughter that she has a really hard time taking care of and making ends meet. And she just shared her struggles with me, and I listened. So I made absolutely no promises, except that I will work as hard as I possibly can to help people through their struggles and to make change so that their lives aren't so difficult anymore. Mr. Luna was also very helpful in getting me connected with legal services that helped the constituent out who was facing eviction. So he's a good partner to have, I believe. So I see nothing wrong with meeting with him. He creates no financial benefit for me, only provides me assistance in doing my job as a council person in helping my constituents. So thank you. And thank you for asking. And I hope that provided you the information that you were looking for.
Just if I could interrupt just for a legal point, I noticed you all were talking about a potential meeting either on Friday or Saturday. I believe it was with Councilmember Noble, Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas, and Councilmember Douglas. Just
I will be out of town.
okay. So just to the extent there will be or potentially be three of you, just be mindful of the open meetings law and.
Can we get that notice? Because I'd like to attend that as well.
Okay, so we'll have to discuss with the city clerk posting that as a public meeting.
Is the public invited to this meeting? Is it open to the public?
I got one head shaking no and one yes.
Okay, we'll need some sort of agenda, time, and location in order to meet legal requirements.
I'll make sure Mr. Luna gets you guys that information.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
And I would just like to add a few things. Thank you, Mayor. Kind of lost my train of thought, but just one thing I wanted to mention. You said it, well, first, Sarah, I want you to clarify our city acting attorney tonight. Anything that any elected official or anyone sitting on this dais, if we feel it's important to give in a report, we have the right to do that. Is that correct? And if we do meet with someone, aren't we supposed to report that as well?
I believe there's discretion with respect to what's said at the council during council reports, in that the items that don't fall under administrative council business or other items on the agenda may be appropriate to discuss during council reports.
Okay, and I do think it's just interesting too, and especially for the council members that serve on the housing authority meetings, and we never hear any reports back on anything.
I'd like to remind you of council policy and attacking your fellow council members. Yeah, and I'm stopping you to remind you.
One person is talking.
Thank you.
We do not correct a wrong by committing another wrong.
Thank you. Can you tell me as well, Miss Sarah, are we not allowed to have any information, or can you let us know proceeding? Because that I'm aware of, I haven't gotten any of the mayor or the council members any updates or what's discussed, or is that confidential? Eventually, I would like to know that. And then also, just because someone is living in a situation, or people have lived in a situation like Village Crest, every person should be deserved to live fairly and in adequate conditions. And that's what we are standing up for, that these needs are addressed. It's nothing secret. Anybody can come and listen, and that's my biggest concern, is that we're trying to make sure everyone in Commerce City and Colorado has a quality community for a lifetime. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I'd be happy to report that we had a housing authority meeting just last week and covered a variety of topics, several of which were conducted in executive session, so we can't discuss those, but we went over the financials like we do on a monthly basis. And we also discussed the future of Pinecrest, which is one of the properties in the housing authority. And I did bring up the complaints that we've been receiving at Connor Estates and at Village Crest to the housing authority. And, you know, we discussed about possible solutions and, you know, what the housing authority director has been doing in working with those residents, as well as with Dr. Luna and the management companies at these properties. And then they also reminded us that because they are privately owned properties, that the housing authority's direct influence is limited, but that's not to say that we can't do anything and that they're not trying to do anything, but really it comes down to getting cooperation from the management companies and escalating issues up through the various channels. At the end of the day, enforcement of these things comes down to the city, which is why I asked about the meeting with Dr. Luna and, you know, if any policies had been discussed to bring forward to the council as a whole, because I think it's something that if we want to influence and make sure that this doesn't happen in the future, we either have to work with our state legislators to bring forth legislation, or we have to bring forth our own ordinances and type of policies, similar to how some other cities around the metro area have done.
Do you want to highlight council policy number 2, paragraph F, line 6, subject to a need to maintain necessary confidentiality. Each member of the city council will report to all other council members all meetings to be held with developers, builders, and businesses, and get their input and keep them advised of processes and negotiations, and give information and detail after the fact. No agreement shall be reached with developers on behalf of the council without council approval. That is the requirement that is listed in our council policy. For Councilmember Noble.
I handily keep our council policies on my laptop, having served on the Policy and Governance Committee for a very long time. It would seem to me that if someone wants there to be very specific rules guiding council reports, that needs to be a council policy. At this point, the only reference to council reports is council reports are limited to reports by council members regarding meetings and activities related to city council business since the previous council meeting, and is limited to 5 minutes each unless extended by the council. That's it.
All right, I think we've beat this horse. Now move on to my report on Wednesday. Is it Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, thank you. On Wednesday, Acting City Manager Rogers and myself met with the sales team of LGI Homes, who wanted an update on what is taking place within the city. I will be departing in about 28 hours for Kansas City for the National League of Cities event. The mayor pro tem is designated mayor in my absence, should the need arise, or should the fact I never return to, that being said, we're gonna adjourn to the URA meeting. How much time do you need to get that set up? Good to go now, great. Miss Lovato, do you want to come up here and sit on our empty seat? Didn't think I would need this tonight. Call the URA meeting to order and ask Secretary to call the roll.
Chair Huseman.
Present.
Vice Chair Allen Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Madera.
Here.
Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Noble.
Here.
Commissioner Hurst. Here. Commissioner Ford.
Here.
Commissioner Douglas.
Here.
Commissioner Boucher. Commissioner Tedesco. Chair Huseman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, looking for a motion and a second to excuse the members not present. Vice Chair,
So moved.
Commissioner Madera,
Second.
have a motion and a second to excuse the members not present. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Before I go in, this next item, is Mr. Machuga online?
No, Chair, he is not.
All right, seeing as he is not online, I don't see a need to amend the agenda. So we will move on to approval of the minutes. Looking for a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Vice Chair,
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Hurst,
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to administrative business. First up is going to be strategic planning for the URA. I'll invite Armando Wadiola and Trenton Robinson forward to give the presentation.
I'll do a very, very brief introduction. As you members of the CCURA are aware, we started a conversation at the last URA meeting in which we talked about the history of the URA, when we were formed, what our current urban renewal areas are, some of the strategies and the finances within those areas. This is really step 2 to that strategic planning initiative, where we have Armando and Trenton from the Center of Innovation leading us on what's called a charter today. Ultimately, what we talked about at the last meeting was where we were, what we've accomplished, and what we want to focus on is who we think we are and where we want to be in the future. So Armando and Trenton are going to lead you on an exercise in which you'll give direction on what you believe the mission of the CCURA should be and what your vision is for our future, so that staff can go back, work on goals, strategic priorities, objectives to bring back to the CCURA at a future date. To approve into a strategic plan that will be accompanied with an action plan or a work program for what we want to accomplish over the foreseeable future. So with that, I'll introduce you to Trenton and Armando, and you're in for quite a treat. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to do a quick overview of kind of strategic planning today before we start our exercise. I know it's been a long night, so I'm going to try to go through it pretty quick, and then we'll split up into some groups. So I'm going to get started. I want to talk a little bit about the charter. We did send out an email with giving you some topics in regards to the charter, but I just want to follow up as far as the URA charter. It really is the purpose and the reason why is we want to develop a charter is it's the document that clarifies the board direction while establishing boundaries. The charter ensures that all stakeholders are on the same page. It provides a roadmap for projects from start to finish. It serves as a source for the board members to illustrate focus and direction on the URA, and it also educates others, for example, URA leaders, Commerce City residents, and other groups, and illustrates direction of the board. With that said, it's very important we start from the basics. A term that Jason used and we're using a little bit more is going back to our foundation, so really establishing the charter for the URA. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick overview of the strategic plan. The overall goal would be is to establish a strategic plan. We'll be passing out an example of what Denver does, and that'd be the ultimate deliverable, is really putting together a strategic plan for the URA, which would be a 3 to 5 year plan, but I will go over strategic planning. This might be a lot of review for some of you, but what I really want to do is kind of give you an illustration of what a true strategic plan cycle is. And so what I'll do is I'll start with an overview, and the overview will have the assess, the design, the build, and the managing of a strategic plan. And so when we start with the strategic plan, we always got to start with the current state. And that is, I believe Bill has done that previously in the last 2 meetings, kind of looked at the history, has looked at some past performance, has gone over some of the projects and some of the SWOT analysis of currently where the URA is currently at. And with that is the assess, but what we're gonna work on today is we're really gonna kind of work on the mission, is that square. And so we're gonna talk about the design phase. Within the design phase, we're gonna talk about the mission, is really establishing who we are, what we want to be, what's our purpose, what's the purpose of the URA. And from there, that is point A, we want to go to point B, and that is the vision statement. There was a couple documents that were sent out to the group in regards to giving some examples. I used Google's example, very easy, very simple vision statement and mission statement. And so what we want to do with the URA is really establish a good mission statement and a good vision statement so you can lead staff into a good direction so we can be successful to make sure that we are obtaining your outcomes. And so with that said, on the design, I'm going to kind of go a high level, and that is within the design phase, we have the URA long-term strategies. Once we complete a charter, we'll establish these long-term strategies that will be direction from the board members. There's an umbrella there, and that keeps us in line. It keeps us on that straight path from A to point B. We're also going to be looking at long-term strategic objectives. These objectives are going to be measurable. I always talk about what we want to look at strategic objectives is really the financial, the customer, the operations, and the people. When we build these strategic objectives, that's what we want to look at. We want to be able to measure this out to this group, making sure that we are accomplishing the overview or the future state and the vision. From there, we'll go out to the build. This is more what staff or Bill would be working with, and that is regards to the URA goals, and keeping it smart. The old acronym, as we usually say, is specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, and time-bound. And so what we do is from there, we look at yearly annual work plans, and what we'd want to do is within those work plans, we're looking at annual work plan, budget, tactics, KPIs, and projects. So what we want to look at today when we're looking at the mission and the vision is we want to look at the bigger picture, not the individual projects. Within each project, we can break the projects down into doing more of a work plan, more of a strategic objectives within those projects. But really, the build is really the vision and how do we get there, making sure that we're in line from going to point A to point B and not getting out of that umbrella. So what we also want to do is the execution, which is the manage. This is probably the most important part. This is what we probably, or Bill will be spending most of the year, is that execution and the managing of this plan, if we can execute a good plan. And that is the people, making sure that people know, people are held accountable, people know what we're trying to accomplish, making sure that we communicate that. The management system, it can be a spreadsheet. We have Invisio as for the city, but there's other methods that we're making sure that we collect all this data and we have it in one place, everyone's using the same data, and that way we can report out. And then the final part would be the process and review. Process and review is important because that gives us the opportunity to look at this plan on a monthly, quarterly, annually, and able to make adjustments, able to report and be transparent, and making sure that our strategic plan is going as it's proposed. So that's a quick overview. I apologize that I cut a lot of it out, but I think it's important to understand the overall strategic plan is to complete a deliverable, which Bill will be passing out. Bill, do you have that? Yes. Okay. So as you can see, they did an excellent job as far as putting it deliverable together. It gives the message, it does give the opportunity for the public and for any stakeholders to understand what the vision is and what we're trying to accomplish. So what we're going to be doing, any questions on the strategic plan overview? Okay. So what we're gonna be doing is, I know everyone's a little tired, but at least we're gonna get up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be dividing up into, there's 9 of us, so we'll be dividing into 2 groups, 4 and 5. One would be on the left-hand corner, and the other 4 would be on the right-hand corner. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna break up into groups for about 15 to 20 minutes. And what we're really gonna work on is trying to come up with a mission and a vision. First, we're gonna do the mission, and then we'll sit down, or we'll be at the groups individually, and we'll work and help guide the group to come up with themes, ideas. Really, it's a brainstorming session is what we're really trying to ask for. Questions? Yes.
Okay, I've been wanting to ask this question for quite a while, and this seems to be the best time to do it. I really appreciate that Mrs. Lovato is here with us tonight, but I'm gravely concerned that we are operating all of these Urban Renewal Authority meetings without our full panel. It was designed to have the community involved. We have representatives not only from the school district, but as we know, tonight we're going to have a new one from the fire district. We have other residents who were appointed to this group. You're calling for 5 to 6 people per group, but there's only 9 of us. And that's with 1 council member missing. And I'm concerned that we're holding these meetings at random times. No one knows when they're going to be. They're either going to be at 11 at night or 9, or sometimes they're after a study session. Sometimes they're after a council meeting. And this has nothing to do with Bill. He walked into this, and this is what he was handed. But I think it's wholly inappropriate, and I don't see how we can do this tonight without a full complement of the URA board.
You want to answer that?
I'll go ahead and answer that. I appreciate your comments, ma'am. And you are correct. Obviously, you are a board of 13, and being able to have the broad participation necessary for all creative thoughts and I'll call it positive challenges for URA staff and for us to be able to take forward should have all involvement in that. I think the difficulty that we are, I'll call it, continually trying to balance is how to be able to get all of the necessary individuals that have the representation on your board present. And given that, I think with all good intentions, we thought we would have the majority or a significant number of those able to be present to participate. This is a very important effort. This is staking the future of what the URA does and what it means to the community. So there's no real good answer, unfortunately, about how to best approach this. We can continue to keep looking for a future date to where we can get everybody together. but the difficulty may still be there that we may not have everybody present. So I believe today's events were to have the majority and then Bill have an opportunity for those who aren't present to go back, to have the similar conversation that you all are having tonight. No different of an approach, no different of a discussion, and then weaving those comments in and bringing that back to the next council meeting. If that's not what works for you all as a body, then obviously we will continue to keep looking for that particular period in time. But I would say we thought it was important to at least engage and get you all thinking, regardless if we have it tonight or not, get you all thinking about what is the future for the URA. What do you all want it to be?
I would like to follow up. So I also serve on the Boards and Commissions Committee. And when someone interviews for a board or a commission, they're given when the meetings are held, the day that they're held on, and will they be available for those meetings. If all of our meetings are random, would we say to an interviewee, are you available to be at our whim to come to a meeting of the Senior Commission? We don't know when we're going to have it. It might be late, it might be early, it might be this Monday, it might be another Monday. That's the problem, is that we're not giving a consistent day and time. We have to say to them, this is when they're going to be. If it's on a study session night and we do this at 6 p.m., we do URA at 6 p.m. and we must finish at 7. Or we start URA at 5:30, we must finish at 7 and then we do study session after that. And we don't have the URA meetings sometimes twice a month, sometimes skip a month, sometimes 3 times a month, so that there is consistency, because I want to be fair to the residents of Commerce City who are participating in the Urban Renewal Authority, so that their voices are heard, not only heard, but are incorporated into this strategic plan.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we heard that, I'll call it consistency theme, very clearly when I'll call it last came to you all when we met in 2308, a couple of months ago. We've actually have communicated that, right, we're moving to study session nights as standing meetings for URA. I think the question with respect to does URA go before City Council, we previously had that structure, and based on feedback, we moved away from that structure to having it at the end because there was a lot of city business that we have on our agendas that are equally important to the URA. So there's that balancing act that we are also trying to navigate. Like I said, I think it always comes back down to if we're trying to drive greater participation amongst all of the represented voices from our community, from those who have a seat, then we have to continue then to look more at the future schedule and trying to work that around, or approaching this topic in a different sense, in a different light that still gets us to the goal.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo my support for that, and I would propose moving it before the study session and have it at 6, or if we say we're having it at 7, recess, or I guess we can't recess the study session, but take a break in the study session to hold the URA meeting at the hour that we set, and then return to the study session after, because, you know, this meeting was supposed to start at 7:15, and it's 2 hours later, so if I was one of the other commissioners that wasn't already here, I would probably drop off the call as well.
Understood.
Agree wholeheartedly with all those comments that were made, especially, you know, we're starting 2 hours late, you know, so our URA, if it's truly going to be a URA board, then we need to get away from the let's call a special meeting of the URA every time we need to have a meeting and just have a standing meeting. And maybe that standing meeting has a very short agenda to say all we're going to do is approve minutes from the previous meeting, or maybe it has a full agenda. but the consistency needs to exist in order to try to get the participation back to where it is, because we've probably had more meetings than not this year that has just been the city council. And that's not the intention. And whenever it's just the city council making choices, then it just makes it to where all the other members are just a financial arm and they're not actually participating within what the URA is supposed to be about. So I'm all for, once a month, once every bi-monthly, whatever, unless something comes up that truly requires a special meeting, then it needs to just be, it's going to be a set meeting. And the time does need to be set so that all participants know when they should be expected to be online.
Perfect. If I may offer this, if we can come to the next URA meeting, we do have one planned before the end of the year. I think we can outline a standing meeting schedule for you all here to act upon. But I think at the same time, given that we already have a rather full agenda for the meetings through the rest of the year, that this conversation may get kicked to the turn of the new year. And if that is okay with you all as a body, then obviously we will work from that point. And it gives more than enough time for us then to make sure the full body representation is here. But that's a question to you all.
Mr. Gibson?
Chair Huseman, thank you. Just as a reminder, City Council by code is limited to 10:30 p.m. meetings, so that's why the URA was scheduled to be after those meetings, so council business can be conducted. So if the URA starts at 5:30 or 6, whatever time that goes into, if you guys end at 7:30 for URA, that's time out of the City Council agendas. So just keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that happens. Mr. Aiken, I appreciate everything that you're doing with the URA. This URA has existed for 20-plus years, and things of mission statement and vision and everything that we're talking about hasn't existed, and I appreciate everything that you're bringing in the direction that you're trying to make the URA go so that it's as successful as possible. And so that whenever we have projects that qualify for URA, that we're getting the most out of them, and I really just appreciate everything that you're trying to accomplish, as opposed to just managing projects that are out there and really making it so that it has an impact for future generations to come. So thank you very much for the work on that. I really do agree with Councilmember Noble. There's only 9 of us sitting up here. Let's kick this out to when we can have more members out there. I mean, this is not something that is as urgent as we're approving financing or this or that. I mean, it's something, this is strategic in nature. I think the seed has been planted. We can continue to water that seed over the next couple of months in order to really get people thinking about this strategic direction. And then from there, just continue to move forward with a meeting, hopefully with as many participants as possible in order to have that. Mr. Rogers?
Not necessarily for your consideration, but this was something that should be brought back to the council. As currently stipulated in section 2-2001 of our municipal code, it is stated that study sessions are required to start at 6 p.m. So if we are going to be having URA at a standing meeting, either they got to start at 5 or we will have to make adjustments within the ordinance to reflect that time.
So
Just to clarify, council can by motion change that time at a regular meeting. So just thinking in advance, if next Monday, for example, if you wanted to bring that business up, that would be possible.
my question to that, I think Councilmember Madera made a great point that we can start the study session at 6 o'clock. Can we pause or recess the study session for an hour or so, conduct the URA business at 7 o'clock, come back into the study session, and we can roll with whatever.
I don't see an issue with that with respect to the code.
Perfect. So let's try to get a standing schedule of URA meetings to occur on study session nights. They'll start at 7 p.m. once monthly, if we need be, once bi-monthly. Figure out what it needs to be in order to get it done. But let's put some consistency out there and really start driving some participation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to some resolutions. We're going to start with Resolution URA 2022-18, which is approving an IGA with Adams County. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff regarding this resolution? Seeing none, looking for a motion and a second to adopt Resolution URA 2022-18. Commissioner Hurst?
So moved.
Vice Chair?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution URA 2022-18. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the Secretary please read the title?
Resolution 2022-18, a resolution authorizing and approving an intergovernmental agreement with Adams County to share the cost to select, retain, and compensate a vendor to create an urban renewal plan for the area in and around 72nd Light Rail RTD station.
Thanks, sir. Have a motion and a second to adopt resolution URA 2022-18. The title has been written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion is going to carry 8-1 with 4 absences. 3 absences. All right, thank you. All right, next up is resolution URA 2022-20, acknowledging the appointment of Craig Machuga to the URA. Any commissioners have any questions for staff? Seeing none, looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution URA 2022-20. Commissioner Hurst,
So moved.
Vice Chair.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt resolution URA 2022-20. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the secretary please read the title?
Resolution URA 2022-20, a resolution acknowledging the appointment of Craig Machuga to the Commerce City Urban Renewal Authority Board of Commissioners.
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution URA 2022-20. The title has been read. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, 9-0, 3 absences. We are adjourned.
It's